Hi everyone. Good to see you on my channel today. Today I will tell you a wonderful story. It is full of love and kindness. I hope you enjoy it and I wish you an enjoyable viewing experience. Thank you.
Emily arrived home to find her husband's mistress standing in front of her, and when she held out the document, "What a lovely day today," Emily exclaimed, putting on the table a sumptuous dish of roast duck. "I'm so glad we decided to have lunch with your brother today," Susan said, looking around the table and realizing that everything was in place. She clapped her hands together in satisfaction. A satisfied smile appeared on her face. Her dear, beloved husband John came over to her, put his arm around her waist and pulled her close. Emily felt a pleasant warmth on her back, turned around to face him and kissed him on the lips. It had been a full 3 years since they had known each other, and a full 5 months since their wedding day. Emily adored her husband, considered him the closest thing she had to a man. He was well-built, handsome, intelligent, the kind of man one could never find. Emily considered herself lucky. John's hands moved lower, gripping her thighs tighter. "Honey, not now. We have guests coming over," she said, laughing. John was still holding her in his arms, trying to reach her warm neck with his moist, cool lips. Emily kept dodging and laughing, enjoying the sudden game. But then the doorbell rang. Emily opened the door in front of her guests and saw her brother John on the doorstep. "This is Ashley." He introduced his girlfriend. Emily took a quick glance at the attractive woman with slender legs and a bushy mop of black hair. She was petite and fragile. The gray eyes and thin lips on her pale face spoke of a sensitive nature. "Nice to meet you. Come in," she said. Soon John appeared. He greeted the guests, shook his brother's hand, and glanced at Ashley, sizing her up. He kept his emotions to himself. "Let's get to the table," Emily broke the silence. "How did you two meet?" She cut off a piece of duck. The meat was very tender, sent a small piece into her mouth, and then looked up at Ashley, wanting to hear the story of their acquaintance. The girl was a little confused, taking a napkin to wet her lips. Michael beat her to it. Taking a sip of wine, he began to tell the story of their first meeting. "Ashley was giving a seminar at our hospital. A very interesting topic, by the way. He picked up a golden potato with his fork. The effects of drugs on the human body." Emily raised her eyebrows, surprised at the topic his girlfriend had chosen. "Are you a medical professional too?" "I graduated from medical school," Ashley explained, lowering her gaze to her plate. After a second, she glanced at John, who kept his gaze on her. He was sitting diagonally, acting like an observer studying the object that caught his eye. "Did you know?" Emily interrogated her husband. The man, not understanding what she was talking about, interrogated his wife again. It turned out that John had fallen out of the conversation a little, immersed in thought. "Oh my. I did not know that the usual drugs can be real killers. It sounds fantastic." She was genuinely surprised. "Are you planning to get married?" "All you need to know," Michael replied cheerfully. Emily glanced over at Ashley. She replied that they were thinking about it. After a hearty dinner, it was time for hot tea and sweet dessert. "Be careful. There's a risk of swallowing your tongue, because this pie is so good," Emily said as she set a gorgeous strawberry pie with whipped cream on the table. "Did you make it yourself?" Michael wondered. "I got it from the bakery around the corner," she joked. The audience supported her with laughter. "Next week I'm going on a business trip to Germany," John's brother said. He explained that he was being sent on a training course, a long-time dream. There is nothing better than sharing experiences. His brother and his wife supported him. They congratulated Michael on this pleasant news. The dinner came to an end, and the guests, thanking for their hospitality, went home. "But do you think they'll make it?" Emily asked her husband John while putting the dishes in the dishwasher. He replied that they probably would, because they love each other, and you can see it on their faces. Emily finished cleaning up the kitchen, then wrapped her arms around John's neck and pressed herself against him. "I missed you so much," she said, kissing him on the lips. He kissed her back. They snuggled into each other, wrapping each other in an embrace. They walked through the hallway, ending up in a dark room. The deeper they went into it, the more the darkness engulfed them, hiding their silhouettes from view. Deep breathing was heard, the rustle of clothing. Emily was cleaning the house one day, checking the dust and putting things in their places. In the background, the television was playing a program about traveling. Suddenly, it stopped abruptly. There was a breaking news broadcast. The television announced that Flight RU-295 New York-Los Angeles had to make an unscheduled landing in Denver, the newscaster said. Emily knew that Michael was supposed to be on that flight. She immediately called her husband, telling him about it. John replied that he would call his brother back and find out what had happened. But after dialing his number, John heard only short beeps. A little while later, he got a call from Ashley. "Hello, John, hi. Did you call?" "Yes, Ashley, hi. I wanted to know what flight Michael was on." Emily said there was an emergency landing on TV on a flight to Los Angeles. "What? Emergency landing? What was the flight number?" the girl asked. John called out the numbers, and then Ashley breathed a sigh of relief. No. Luckily, Michael has a completely different flight number and he's fine. Don't worry. I just finished talking to him," she replied convincingly. John was in no hurry to end the conversation. "Was there anything else?" Ashley asked. "No, I think it's all clear now," John replied and reluctantly said goodbye. In the evening, he returned home as usual. Emily was waiting for him there. She was happy to see her beloved husband again, asked about his mood, sat down at the table, poured tea into mugs. But suddenly she felt sick. It had happened to her before, and she knew it would pass soon. The thing was that Emily suffered from anemia, which was not well treated. She took daily vitamins to keep her healthy, but it had little effect on her daily life, except now. Only her doctor had warned her that with such a condition, she was unlikely to be able to bear and deliver a child. It made Emily sad, and she often brought it up, fearing that perhaps John wanted children, but with her around, it was unlikely he would ever be able to realize it. "Is everything all right?" John asked, gently holding his wife under her elbow and around her waist. A little more, and Emily stopped feeling dizzy. "We should see another doctor," John suggested. Emily carefully lowered herself onto the cushioned seat. "How long have you been seeing him?" "There's no improvement, and I think it's the opposite," her husband said. "Well, don't say that. Dr. Valerie is a very good specialist," Emily said, and started dinner. John decided not to argue with her, knowing that Emily herself was very careful about her health. After dinner, the couple went to bed. The next day after work, John left the office, headed to his car, walking, trying to find the keys in his pocket as he walked. By chance, he noticed a familiar figure to his right. He stopped his gaze briefly and suddenly saw Ashley standing in front of him. She was leaning over the open hood, obviously trying to find the cause of the malfunction. John couldn't pass by without helping her figure it out. He went over to her and leaned over the hood. "I don't understand what's wrong here," she asked rhetorically, placing her right hand on her hip. She knew someone had approached her, but looked up in surprise and exclaimed, "Ah, John, how timely you are here," he answered, deliberately lingering his gaze on her eyes. "I always show up at the right place at the right time." John then turned his attention back to the car and concluded that the car repairman was needed. Ashley sighed regretfully. "Don't worry, I'll take you where you need to go," John said, easing Ashley's plight. "Oh, I'd appreciate that," she said, tucking a strand of black hair behind her ear. John opened the door to his car and Ashley sat down happily. They drove in almost complete silence, occasionally exchanging a few words. John asked how Michael, who was now in Berlin, was doing. Ashley replied that he was happy to be there, that he was doing well, and that he was glad that he hadn't turned down the offer. "I am very happy for him. I remember Michael always dreamed of being a doctor since he was a kid. And it looks like it's coming true," John concluded, glancing at Ashley. Soon they were in the driveway of the house. Ashley was carrying a heavy bag and John offered to help her carry it upstairs. She agreed. A few minutes later, they were in a small but cozy apartment. Michael had purchased it a year ago, taking off his high-heeled shoes. Ashley walked to the kitchen and offered John something to drink. Without hearing his response, she pulled out 2 glasses and splashed some whiskey. John was a little discouraged by what was happening because he wasn't going to stay long. But he couldn't refuse such a beautiful girl either. At that moment, Ashley was wearing a beige dress with black stripes that emphasized her slim figure. She went to the window, opened it, and then took out a cigarette and smoked. John had no idea that she could act so relaxed in company with Michael. She always gave the impression of a nice and proper girl. John stared at her, and at the orange flame that grew stronger with each new puff of Ashley's smoke. There was a fire burning inside John that he didn't want to let go. The girl inhaled the thick stream of smoke eagerly, opening her sensual lips slightly. Her languid gaze made John question his ability to keep his composure. This attractive, delicate girl with white skin, graceful neck, beautiful shoulders, and hips seemed the epitome of defiance. John walked over to the table, picked up his glass, and took a small sip. Ashley offered him a smoke as well. Everything happened in silence, as if they were both enjoying the atmosphere. John took the cigarette from her hands with his index finger and thumb and brought it to his lips. He did something he didn't usually do. He covered his mouth and let the smoke drift away, without taking his eyes off the girl. And John himself didn't notice that he was already kissing her. It was a blur, a fleeting loss of judgment. But what a sweet moment it was, full of feeling and passion. If it hadn't been for the phone call, John would hardly have been able to come to his senses. It was his wife, Emily. She was already waiting for her husband at home and told him that dinner had long since gone cold. "Don't worry, darling, I'll be there soon. I had to stay late for work. I've been so busy, I forgot to call you," John said, looking at Ashley. She lifted the corners of her lips slightly. John found her smile charming, and he smiled back. "I'm on my way." "Kisses," he said, and then he hung up the phone, still looking at Ashley, realizing that he didn't want to break up with her at all. But if he did, he wasn't doing right by his wife. Just before he left the apartment, he stopped for a moment and looked at the girl who had stirred new feelings inside of him today. He knew that he should not continue with what had happened. So with just one last glance at the searing brunette, he walked out the door. When John returned home, his beloved wife met him here. She, as always, met him on the doorstep with a hug and a kiss. "I waited for you. Today you were delayed, not on a joke," she said. She looked tired. John answered her with the usual phrase, and then went into the kitchen, put some food on his plate, and sat down at the table. Emily was telling him about the day before, but John's thoughts were now directed in a completely different direction. He put his fork to his mouth, but he couldn't help but think about Ashley. She seemed so mysterious, so alluring and mysterious. He wanted to keep being around her, to unravel what lurked behind her appearance. He couldn't get rid of the image in front of his eyes, namely her gray eyes, lined with black pencil, her long eyelashes, and her open mouth. "John, are you here?" Emily interrogated him when she didn't get an answer to her question. "Did you ask something?" "As if waking up," said her husband. "What did you do at work today?" Emily asked the question again. John shrugged his shoulders slightly, tilted his head to the left, and began to make up as he went along the flurry of activity he'd supposedly pulled off after hours. Emily stared at him, then yawned, blinking her eyes a few times and wiping away a tear. "I'm so sleepy already," she said. "Go to bed." Then John told her. "I want to wait for you," Emily said, resting her blonde head on his shoulder. At last they went to bed, and Emily complained to her husband again about her dizziness, then fell asleep. John, on the other hand, couldn't sleep for a long time. The next day, when he was at work, Emily called him and told him that she had been taken to the hospital. He jumped out of his chair in surprise. "What happened?" "Are you all right?" he asked. "I don't know. I passed out in the cafe and woke up in the hospital," Emily explained. "Honey, I'm on my way right now," John said, and leaving all his work and ordering his secretary to write down everything important, he went straight to the hospital. That day, Emily decided to meet an old friend at a cafe. Everything was fine at first. They were talking nicely, sharing things with each other. But at one point, Emily suddenly felt short of breath. She decided to get up to ask the waiter to turn on the air conditioner. But as soon as she did, her legs gave out and she collapsed to the floor. Her friend rushed to her, and the cafe staff called an ambulance. John paced the hallway in boredom. A nurse ran into him. "Calm down, man," answered him a girl whose low voice did not match her fragile appearance. "Your wife is fine. Ward 5. Come in, please," the nurse said, pointing to the door with her right hand. John literally flew in. Emily was lying there, covered by a sheet. When John saw her, he rushed to her bedside, knelt down, and took her palm in his hands. "Emily, my sweet love, how glad I am that you are well. When you called me, I was so frightened," said the husband, covering his wife's palms with kisses, pressing against her chest, looking into her eyes. "It's all over now. My good man, everything is over," she said, and closed her eyes. Tears came to her eyes. "Why are you crying?" John asked her. "I lost the baby," Emily whispered. She squeezed her eyes shut even tighter, trying to hold back the tears, but she couldn't and burst into tears. "What are you talking about?" John said, not believing his ears. He soothed his wife, stroking her shoulders and back. 5 days later, Emily was discharged home. The doctor recommended regular vitamin intake as well as scheduled IVs to keep her healthy. He also asked for bed rest and no excessive stress on the body. Emily was a little upset about her condition and the fact that she had to lead a sedentary lifestyle. Despite this, she took regular walks in the park and tried to be outdoors more. Sometimes, when John had a free moment, he would join her. Together, they strolled leisurely along the narrow paths, admiring the perfect lawn and the view of the waterfront. Suddenly, John happened to see Ashley on his left. He was very happy to see her, but had to restrain himself in his wife's presence so as not to give himself away. He motioned for Emily to take a seat on the bench. The wife felt devastated. She realized that she needed to draw a resource from somewhere, to take strength to continue living life to the fullest. But the memory of the loss of her child each time brought her down into an abyss of sadness and melancholy. She understood that she had to be in the mood, she had to please her husband, but she just didn't have the strength to do it, and she didn't know where to get it from. Silently, she stared at her feet in her blue shoes, occasionally shifting her blank stare to passers-by. Meanwhile, John glanced discreetly to her left. There, behind a large tree trunk, she could be seen. Ashley was talking to a young man John didn't know. They were talking and laughing about something. And John suddenly felt an incipient jealousy building inside him. Why would he do that? And why would he do that? He has a wife. He loves her. What a man of property. Emily was silent, and John was silent. And he kept glancing over at Ashley. He secretly hoped she'd see him. It had been so long since they'd last seen each other. Then John's thoughts turned to Michael. How's he doing? I'd have to ask Ashley about that, he thought. Who's that? Ashley, Emily suddenly asked him. John pretended as if he didn't understand where she'd seen her or who she was talking about. It's not Ashley. You must be imagining it, John said for some reason. But Emily persisted and soon called Ashley's name. She turned around and waved at them with a big smile. Come here, Emily shouted to her. John, whose memory of kissing her was still fresh in his mind, got a little nervous, froze on the bench, and began to adjust his shirt. Ashley stepped closer to them, and Emily greeted her. Strangely enough, she acted perfectly calm, as if there was nothing between her and John at all. The man even thought for a moment that he might have been taking something too seriously that wasn't really worth worrying about at all. How are you doing? Tell me, how's Michael? Emily asked. Ashley was eager to talk about what was going on, about her life. Michael is doing well. He's learning. He's getting new knowledge. He likes everything. He promised to send me a picture, but he can't send it. He says he has no time, she said through laughter. Well done, boy. It's always been his dream, said Emily. I'm happy for him, too, Ashley said. Then she turned her gaze to John and looked him straight in the eye. He felt like she was seducing him right now with her pretty face. He felt his cheeks begin to burn, and he glanced furtively at Emily's wife. He tried to see if she suspected anything, but all his fears were in vain. Emily had her full attention on Ashley, who was a breath of fresh air to her. Yes, she lacked female companionship, and she needed the support of a woman. She even suggested to Ashley that they get together sometime to sit in a cafe. She said she'd be glad to, but she'd have to pick a free day. They talked for a while, and then Ashley said she had to go. John and Emily headed home as well. Evening had fallen. A cool air was descending on the town. It was pleasantly soothing and drowsy, making them want to go home and crawl under the warm blankets. That night, John couldn't sleep again. Thoughts of this girl, who was much braver than he had thought, would not leave him. The next day, when his workday was over and he was heading to his car, he heard a familiar hello. John stopped, looked in the direction the voice had come from, and was pleasantly surprised. But it really was Ashley in front of him. She was standing, leaning against her car. She was, as she always was, in a frilly pantsuit, slacks, and a blazer with a low-cut tank top underneath. She looked stylish and eye-catching. John looked around to make sure no one could see him. Then he slowly approached the girl, stood in front of her, and looked at her sharp chin, which she lifted up at that moment, presenting her thin, smooth neck to him. John was ready to put his lips to her soft skin right now, but he held himself back on purpose, realizing that it wasn't the right thing to do. "Should I give you a ride?" she asked, knowing the answer in advance. "I'd be willing to go to the end of the world with a nice driver," John answered her. The scent of her perfume reached his nostrils, and he reached for it. He almost touched her cheek, but Ashley dodged him. "Jump in the car, baby," she said rather defiantly. It made her future traveling companion even more excited. John was fully aware that his beloved wife was waiting for him at home. But he was drawn to this woman like a magnet. He literally couldn't help himself. She was truly full of life, full of passion and feelings that make us live and feel that we are alive. John didn't want to think about anything else that day. He wanted to savor the moment. He and Ashley went to the waterfront, where they spent a pleasant evening. The weather was surprisingly warm. It was wonderful to be outdoors. Ashley was having fun, laughing. Her laughter sounded so resonant, and it made John feel different from Emily, who had been feeling more and more depressed and sad lately. She took off her shoes and began to stroll down to the shore, each time gracefully drawing a line with her foot. John walked a little farther along, admiring her dance steps. Then she threw off her jacket, exposing her beautiful shoulders, and began to move them so sweetly and tantalizingly, as if she were deliberately teasing John. Finally, their walk ended, and they both ended up at the apartment where she lived with Michael. As soon as they entered, John pounced on Ashley and pinned her against the wall, running his fingers down her neck, traveling lower. Ashley waited for him to make the first move. The feelings overwhelmed them both. Trying to stop was futile. There seemed to be nothing better than the present moment. John was happy to drown in this passion, in these emotions, to inhale the scent of her skin, her hair, to touch her body and feel himself the happiest man in the world. After this encounter, filled with madness, John could no longer live as before. He began to look at his once beloved wife in a completely different way. She made breakfast and put it on the table. Emily refused to eat breakfast, citing a lack of appetite and a headache. If John had known how to help her, he would have done so. But the only thing he could do was to get his wife to see another doctor, who would get her back on her feet in no time, and they would forget about the constant apathy and lack of energy. That afternoon, John ate breakfast alone. Emily poured tea into a mug and went to her room. Her husband ate breakfast alone, but strangely enough, that's what he wanted now, to be alone with the memories of the woman who had colored his last night. After breakfast, John asked if Emily needed anything. "No, dear, thank you. I have everything." "You don't have to worry," she replied as she turned another page of the book she had spent most of her life in. The next time John met with Ashley, he unwittingly told her about what was going on in his family. She caught his pensive look and asked what was wrong. John replied that he was concerned about his wife's condition. "Yes, I've noticed too that Emily is a bit immersed in herself." "Is something troubling her?" Ashley asked so thoughtfully. Her voice was calm and gentle, and John decided to tell her everything. Ashley listened to him carefully and then said, Yes, it's hard to live with a depressed person. Not only does he himself not know how to deal with it, he also surrounds his loved ones with the same mood. John said he himself began to feel a lack of desire to do anything. I used to always be in a good mood, going to work, trying to do something for the family, to earn more, to fulfill the plan, or to get home faster. But now it's like I'm losing the point of it. I feel like Emily and I have become very distant from each other. So what? She's not interested in me anymore. I feel like I can't help her. The only thing I can do is find a good doctor to get her out of this state of perpetual apathy and depression. Ashley was smoking a cigarette at this time. John was sitting on the edge of the bed, his legs covered by the blanket. Ashley lowered herself to the floor and held out the cigarette to him. Emily took a deep drag on the cigarette. You could hear the tobacco crackling as it burned. "You know, I have a good doctor," Ashley said in a confident voice. "He pulled my best friend out of a similar condition once. He knows what he's talking about." Her confident tone cheered John up a little. He even felt a little relieved at the thought of being able to help Emily. "I'll talk to him, and then I'll let you know when you and Emily can come see him," the brunette said, and took another drag on her cigarette. John looked at Ashley and envied his brother a little, because he had gotten the girl. When the husband got home, he talked to his wife about the new doctor. "He's been praised and recommended," he said. Emily sat on a kitchen chair. John stood behind her, telling her about the doctor and the treatment that was sure to help her. He massaged her neck and shoulders with his large, warm hands. After some thought, Emily agreed. She too wanted to return to a full life and improve her health. At the doctor's appointment, the middle-aged man asked a few questions. "Tell me, how long have you been having negative thoughts?" he asked. Emily sat in the chair, looking around the walls of the office, her gaze resting on a shelf of books. The office was spacious and bright. On William's doctor's desk were a row of elephant figurines, all with their trunks up. Emily counted 9 elephants, all of them different. "Why elephants?" Emily asked instead of answering. That confused the doctor a little. "Well, elephants bring happiness," was the first thing that came to his mind. After a moment's hesitation, he said, "Let us return to the subject of our conversation. I need to understand your condition so that I can give you the right treatment." Emily exhaled and began to tell him about the first signs of her ailment. The doctor listened attentively, making notes in his notebook. Emily watched him as she continued her story. William finally drew some conclusions for himself and then invited John into his office. He explained to both of them what tests needed to be taken. Emily felt overwhelmed. When she and her husband stepped out into the hallway, she turned to him. "Honey, I don't think we should do this. My doctor is doing fine. He knows me well." She was used to her doctor and didn't want to work with a new person. But her husband insisted, saying it would be for her own good. After some hesitation, she agreed. John put his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close to him. She smiled back at him and reached up to kiss him. John was very glad that they did see a doctor and his wife agreed to be treated by another specialist. When the test results came back, John visited the doctor's office again, and the doctor gave him the medication that Emily was to take on a specific schedule. "Tell me, when can we expect to see improvement?" John asked. The doctor answered ambiguously and vaguely, saying that every body was different and it would take time to know how fast the healing process would take place. John shook the doctor's hand, thanking him, and walked out the door. Emily greeted him with a smile. When he got home, she stood wrapped in blankets. She had spent the whole day in bed. "You can put the kettle on and sit down at the table. I ordered your favorite sushi," her husband said in an upbeat mood. "Oh, by the way, I went to the doctor today. He handed over your medication." Emily walked lazily into the kitchen. She had a bit of a headache. "Of course, since you've been in bed all day. Tomorrow your new treatment will begin. I'm sure it'll work out this time, honey," John said as he came out of the bathroom. Emily tried to stay in a good mood, even though she had been experiencing a lingering dull ache in her abdomen since morning. She decided not to tell her husband about it, so that she wouldn't upset him and start whining about her aches and pains. She sat down at the table. Soft, voluminous blanket enveloped the girl like a dense foam. She looked very cute in that outfit. Open-shouldered outfits suited her perfectly. Oh my gosh. Emily used to be cheerful, joyful, always full of life. John remembered the first time they'd met, when Emily had looked so confused, so defenseless, and that made her even more attractive. But now, when John looked at his wife, he didn't recognize her at all. The once cheerful person had turned into a creature with sad eyes that was impossible to look at without pity. John picked up one roll with his chopsticks and held it out to Emily. She laughed, but ate it. Their modest family dinner passed in silence, and then they went to bed. John thought about Ashley. It would be nice to meet her. How is she doing now? Michael should be here soon. Something's holding her up. Maybe it's for the best. John looked at his wife. She was lying on her back with her head turned to the left, sleeping soundly. John ran his hand over her shoulder, then turned to his right side and fell asleep. It wasn't long after Emily had started her new treatment. But strangely enough, she only got worse. She reported it to her husband. He was upset. They put his wife in the hospital. "I'm so worried that something might happen to her," John said when he met up with Ashley again. He was standing by the window. Ashley stepped closer, ran her palm along the line of his jacket, shook off the non-existent dust, and stared directly at his lips. "Understand, you're doing everything you can to help your wife. It's not like you can jump over your head. No one can. It's impossible," she said in a gentle, clear voice. "So stop torturing yourself in vain and let yourself rest after all." She looked into John's eyes, and he believed her, pressed his lips to hers, felt the tenderness of her lips, and sank as if in weightlessness. Ashley pulled off his jacket and slowly began to undo the buttons of his shirt. "You need to relax, trust me," she whispered. It seemed to John that Ashley was right, and there was nothing wrong with him spending another night with her. After all, Ashley had helped him, supported him through everything, even found his wife's doctor. And John liked her as a woman. He couldn't stop her embrace, and he didn't want to. He wrapped his arms around her thighs, squeezed them tightly. Soon he didn't notice how he fell in love with this girl. He kept thinking about his brother, who was still abroad and didn't seem to be in any hurry to return. But John was only too glad for that. As long as Michael was in Germany, he could still go out with Ashley. One morning, the man was getting ready for work. He was already running a little late, hurriedly tying his tie as he went. He'd had a little coffee, almost burned himself. Lately, he'd been making his own breakfast, since Emily was still in bed, indulging in sleep. John entered the room to say goodbye to her before leaving for work. But when he entered, he found his wife lying on the bed. Her right arm was down on the floor. She was lying in a rather unfamiliar position. Suddenly, John was overcome with panic. He was afraid that perhaps Emily wasn't well. And he was right. He ran over to her and checked her pulse first, slapping her cheeks, trying to bring her to her senses. John's whole body shook with fear. He rushed to the phone and dialed Ashley's number. "Stop being hysterical," she said in a voice that had a distinctly steely edge to it. "If she has a pulse, she's alive. I'll call an ambulance to take her back to the hospital. Calm down. I'm coming to you," she said, and then hung up. Ashley's eyes flashed with an evil light. She arrived at John's house very quickly indeed. The ambulance arrived at the same time. Emily was placed on a stretcher and taken to the hospital. Ashley walked over to John and looked into his eyes. "You don't have to be afraid of anything. It's going to be okay," she said so insistently and so confidently, wrapping her arms around John's face. There was fear in his eyes. "The doctors are doing everything they can." "I love you," the brunette added so suddenly that John didn't even know what to say to her. He was grateful to this girl for being there for him and helping him in every way possible. His breathing became more rapid. He was also staring into Ashley's gray eyes, which were literally penetrating him. "I love you, too," he said. Ashley's expression became emotional. Tears welled up in her eyes. Her lips stretched into a smile, and her whole face lit up with a strange light, completely baffling John. It was as if he didn't realize what he'd just said, or how his words had affected Ashley. She nestled her lips against his again. She did it as if they were the only two people in the world. "Let's go to the hospital and check in, and then we'll go to my place," she said. John agreed with her. They arrived at the hospital and asked the doctor about Emily's condition. They received a disappointing answer. William George said that Emily's illness had taken on a new form and her condition had become more complicated. John wrapped his arms around his head. He didn't want to believe what the doctor was telling him. He was depressed. Words could not describe how he felt right now. John got up from his seat, walked out into the hallway, and began to walk from side to side, biting his fist. He did not want to accept the current state of affairs, because the treatment proposed by the doctor was supposed to improve his wife's condition. But in the end, the opposite had happened. And John felt guilty. He had insisted that Emily try the new treatment. Maybe he should have left things as they were, and none of this would be happening now. He berated himself for the mistake he'd made. His head throbbed as if someone inside it was trying to push the walls apart, pushing them harder and harder time after time. But Ashley came out into the hallway, joining him, wanting to hug him, but he wasn't ready for that right now. "I understand how you feel, but we don't have to give up," she said. Her words only made John feel worse. Ashley told him that the best thing to do now was to go home and get a good night's sleep. "There's not much you can do for your wife in your condition," Ashley pointed out. John listened to her again, and they drove to her house. "I neglected her. I betrayed her," the man said, sinking into guilt. "I shouldn't have done it. There's nothing I can do now. What a fool I am. What an idiot. She really loves me. She's faithful to me. And I left her in this state," John said, sitting back in his chair. The top 2 buttons of his dark blue shirt were undone. He was rubbing his chin and cheeks, which were covered with fine stubble. "What about me?" Ashley asked suddenly. "Don't my feelings for you count? My sincere love for you? Do you think that's just a bunch of empty words? How am I supposed to live with that?" She sank to the floor in front of him. John distracted himself from his self-destructive thoughts and looked at her. "You haven't thought about me at all, because I love you too. What am I supposed to do about it?" she asked him, her gaze demanding. Then she grabbed his hands and began to cover them with small kisses. "Are you going to leave me now? Will you leave me? Forget me?" Ashley asked jokingly, looking into his eyes. Ashley's eyes were desperate and bewildered. John took her hands in his. "Wait, that's not what I was going to say at all," he said, fearing to see the distress on Ashley's face. "But that's exactly what you're saying. You're saying you love your wife and regret getting involved with me. You're willing to abandon me when I need your support the most. God, how am I supposed to get through this?" Having said that, Ashley tried to go upstairs, but John held her back. "What are you talking about?" he interjected. His emotions went from self-recrimination to Ashley's depressed state. "Michael," she said barely audibly, putting a hand to her lips. "What's wrong with him?" John interjected with a frown. "I was going to tell you later, but what does it matter now? I got a call from the emergency services yesterday that Michael was missing," she said, turning toward the window. John lit a cigarette, probably trying to calm himself down. He too rose from his chair and hesitantly wanted to approach her, but stopped halfway. "Wait, but how did this happen? I mean, you said he was fine, and you talked on the phone regularly." He looked at her slender figure, clad in the black lace cardigan that suited her so well. "Yes, that's right. We've talked often, but there's been no messages from him in the last few days. I got worried, but I had no contacts to find out what was wrong with him. So I called the search service, through their channels. They found out that a certain Michael Alexandrovich had disappeared without a trace. That sounds strange. Where could he have disappeared to?" John asked. Ashley, standing with her back to him and looking at her reflection in the window, took a deep drag on her cigarette smoke. "It's awful," she said in a shaky voice ready to turn to crying. John came over and put his arm around her. "But why didn't you tell me about it right away? The more time passes, the harder it is to find a person." He waited for a response. Ashley took her time answering. She smoked quietly, put out her cigarette, then turned to John. "I had too much on my plate at one point. I wasn't just thinking about myself, I was thinking about how to help his wife. I tried to handle it on my own, especially since you have your own worries. Your wife needs help, too. You didn't immediately hire a good doctor for her, did you?" Her voice took on a steely tone. It slightly confused and stunned John. He didn't understand what Ashley was getting at. You know I've been doing everything I can to make my wife better. But God knows, things took a different turn. John began to make excuses. Ashley decided to stop talking this time. Walking over to him, she put her arms around him. "You're all I have left," she said. John was overcome with guilt again. He realized that he had no right to leave Ashley alone right now. They spent that night together, comforting each other. The next day, after waiting for John to leave for work, Ashley went to run some errands. Before going out, she took a bath and picked out her clothes. She put on a beige suit, which looked stylish and not too revealing, and completed the look with earrings, a chain, and her favorite perfume. After assessing her reflection in the mirror, she left the apartment. Ashley knew exactly where she was going. Her cab stopped outside the hospital. She walked confidently toward the main entrance. Ashley didn't come here to see Emily. Almost at the end of the hallway, she turned right and opened a door with a sign that read Chief Medical Officer William George. "Oh, you, my dear. It's good to see you," he said, rising from his chair. It seemed he and Ashley had been acquainted for a long time and knew each other quite well. They exchanged welcoming kisses. "You look lovely," as always, the doctor commented on his guest's appearance. "I came to tell you that it's time for us to speed up the process. Don't you think so?" she asked the doctor. He spat in his chair, put his foot on his leg, and put his hands on the armrests. Definitely felt like a king. "Yeah, what do you suggest?" William George said playfully, taking out 2 small glasses and a bottle of white wine from the minibar. He poured just a little into the glasses and held one out to Ashley. "Let's at least drink to our meeting. It's so rare to see you anymore. I miss these moments," he said. Ashley looked at him and took a deep breath without answering. She remembered how he'd picked her up on the street when she was very young, given her shelter and food. Never tried to keep her close to him, but Ashley realized herself that she needed to stay close to him now. And only when she felt her own strength, expressed her desire to live independently and separately from him, she rented her own apartment and began to live again. Except she didn't know how to live any other way. Thanks to William George, she learned to seduce men, to fall in love with them, and then, having obtained the desired result, to part with them coldly and ruthlessly. The worst of it was that this man could give her everything but true love. Ashley, who had lived with him for 4 years, could not get rid of her consumerist attitude toward men. And now that she was on her own, she'd met them time after time and used them. They were all different, each good in his own way, young, interesting, promising, just the kind of men this girl needed. She got to know them, fell in love with them, took what interested her, and then parted. This went on countless times, and there was no way this girl could stop. She did not know how to live differently, because she knew how to behave with the opposite sex only like this. Unfortunately, she was too uptight and closed to be real to them, and so she was only able to communicate with them superficially for her own benefit. Ashley was far from stupid and had caught herself thinking that more than once. But she was unable to change her behavior. It was more difficult than she had imagined. But despite this, there was always one person in her life to whom she could return at any moment, from whom she could ask for help, and who could take pity on her. That was William George, and this time she had come to ask for his help again. She needed to speed things up, for she could not wait long enough to avoid arousing unnecessary suspicion. "I need your help again," Ashley said, clutching the thin-stemmed glass in her hand. "What are you talking about?" The doctor asked her again. "You know what I mean," she replied. "You must remember that I am always ready to help you, because you are like a daughter to me," he said. He walked around the table, sat down on the countertop, and then, facing Ashley at a very close distance, allowed himself to cup her chin. This man loved to feel power over others, and especially this girl. William reached forward, wanting to touch her lips. "Give me what I ask of you first," Ashley replied, pulling his hand away. He looked at her for a moment, then stood up, walked over to the safe, opened it with a small key, and took out a tiny bottle. "Here you go, and don't forget your precautions," he said, sitting down on the edge of the table again and folding his hands on his knee. It was like he was waiting for Ashley to go a little softer on him, but she kept her distance. And they both felt it. When Ashley got home that evening, John was already here, having made them both a light dinner and was glad to have Ashley to keep him company. She asked how his day at work had gone. John replied that things were holding steady. When both of them had satisfied their hunger, they were still in the kitchen talking about their various chores. "I brought some medicine. You should give it to Emily," she mumbled, immediately handing John a small vial. "What is it?" he asked. "Believe me, the glass contains something that will help your wife," Ashley said. "Where did you get it?" he asked again. "Money. It's not that important anymore. What's important is that we have something we can do for your wife," she said, not wanting to go into details. Ashley's words always had a surprising effect on John. Maybe it was the effect of falling in love. The day John had come to visit Emily, he'd done everything Ashley had told him to do. He piously believed that Ashley wished nothing but the best for him and his family. Pouring water into a glass, he opened the vial and poured its contents into the water. Emily's appearance left a lot to be desired. She was pale, her cheeks sunken. When she saw John, she tried to smile. Her lips were pale, chapped. "Emily, you need to drink this," John said. "The doctor said it would help you keep your body strong." "Thank you for your concern," she said in a weak voice. Her husband helped her up so she could take the medicine. Emily emptied the glass and looked into her husband's eyes again. She was sorry he had to see her in this condition. "Don't worry, I'll get better soon, and everything will be fine," she said. John ran his palm over her cheek. He was looking at his wife as if she were a different person now. "You're going to be all right," he said. Even though he said so, he could hardly believe it. For too long the doctors had been trying to cure her. But all their efforts were in vain. The disease had no intention of leaving its new home. Yes, John had lied. But what else could he tell her in this situation? A few days later, Emily got worse. The doctors were very tight-lipped, and one day they informed John that they had to transfer Emily to a hospice unit. He was shocked by the news. As always, Ashley was by his side, putting her hand on his shoulder. Both of them returned home. John was heartbroken. He didn't want his wife to end her life by passing away in the prime of life from some unknown disease. Ashley found something to say to him again. She talked and told him not to blame himself for anything, that he shouldn't forget about himself and his life as it was. "You are young, you are handsome, you are full of vigor. You can't put an end to your life," she said. John sat on the couch, putting his elbows on his knees and covering his face with his palms. "You don't have to put your hands down. You're not alone. You know you have me," she said, spreading his arms. Ashley climbed into his lap, wrapped her arms around his face, and looked into his eyes. "You don't have to give up. Do you hear me? And I'll always be there for you," she said, and then nestled her lips against his. How did she do it? It remains a mystery. But as time went on, Emily stayed in the hospice. There she received the care she needed, no longer hoping for her recovery. Meanwhile, Ashley moved in with John. She was already feeling like a full-fledged mistress and was thinking about what kind of renovations she wanted to make to her room and telling John what kind of kitchen she wanted to replace her old one. He saw Ashley's happy eyes, and it seemed to him that this was the way it should be. Soon she started talking about getting married. More and more changes were happening in John's life. He couldn't figure out if he was going in the right direction. Ashley, on the other hand, was persistent. Unlike him, she knew exactly what she wanted. Once, while John was watching TV on the couch, she sat next to him and stroked his hands. John responded by stroking her hands. Finally, when Ashley had his attention, she said, looking at the ring finger of her hand, "How nice an engagement ring would look here. Don't you think so?" she asked, looking at John. "Yes, any jewelry would look lovely on your beautiful, delicate hands," John pointed out. "No, you don't understand. I want a wedding band," Ashley said flatly. "Are you serious?" John clarified. "What do you think? You and I have been living together under the same roof for so long, and you still wonder if we're serious about each other?" Ashley asked him. "Well, yeah, I agree with you, you're right. But how can we get married when my wife thinks I'm still in love with her?" John suddenly objected. Ashley looked at him reproachfully. How can you say that? Look, you're not only hurting your feelings right now, you're hurting mine too. I'm living with you. I'm hoping for something, making plans, dreaming about our children. Life goes on. I'm not getting any younger. Are you ready to wait and stall for time? You've upset me too. I didn't expect this from you, Ashley said. I was sure that you really loved me and that you were ready to start a family with me. But then all of our meetings and hugs and kisses weren't real. Was it? At that question, Ashley jumped to her feet and looked at John as if he'd just betrayed her. I guess you're saying that you never loved me, and everything that happened between us was just a lie, a pathetic game you made up. Tell me the truth. Ashley screamed. Are you really crazy? No, not at all, John said, trying to even things out. Why would you think that? Calm down, please. I'm not with you for a game, believe me, really. I really like you. I have feelings for you. And of course, I'd like to marry you. Oh, for God's sake. Marry me. John suddenly said, getting down on one knee and taking out the ring he wanted to give her for her birthday. I'm sorry I wanted to do this a little later, but I'm very happy that you're going to be my wife. I really am, he said, and in that moment he was probably sincere. After all, he wasn't going to hurt Ashley and he was ready to take her as his wife. Oh my God, John, this is so sudden, she suddenly exclaimed, delighted. She put her hands to her mouth like a child as if she were afraid to frighten away the sudden happiness. What joy. I'm so happy. At last we will be able to legalize our relationship and not hide, she said. Soon they signed and celebrated this festive celebration in a cafe with friends. Ashley was glowing with happiness. The guests congratulated the newlyweds. John felt a little awkward, but still, hearing the approving congratulations of the guests, was happy about it. John, you're doing great. Congratulations. How is Emily? One of his friends asked him. He replied that everything was the same with her. The groom tried to avoid these questions. After the celebration, family life settled down to a moderate pace. John was still working, visiting Emily in hospice on his free days. She rarely spoke to him and slept more and more. John, when visiting her, could not tell her that he had remarried. Before entering the room, he took off his wedding ring, which was wide and different from the ring Emily had once put on his finger. To be honest, John sighed with relief when he saw Emily asleep. In front of her, he felt a kind of shame for what he'd done. But now he was back home. Today was a day off, and Ashley was looking forward to seeing John. She had a surprise for him, and when he sat down at the table, she pulled out a small box. John looked at everything going on with interest in his eyes. Well, don't you want to open it? She uttered, looking intently into his eyes. He smiled and replied that of course he wanted to. He took off the top pink cardboard lid and saw a beige napkin inside, on which was a soft bear cub the size of a small ball, and next to it a smooth paper strip. What is it? John wondered. He grinned and looked at Ashley again. You and I are having a baby, she said, and stepped a little closer to John, taking his hands in hers and placing them on his lower abdomen. Can you feel that our baby is here? She bared her white teeth. John could hardly believe it. But it was true, and he would soon be a father. God, this was what he had dreamed of for so long. With Emily, they'd tried to have kids, but it hadn't worked out. But with Ashley, it was different. He was about to become a father. Ashley walked down the hallway past John's office. It was a small cubbyhole where he used to crawl in alone, thinking about something or talking on the phone. The door was ajar, and Ashley saw him. He was sitting at the table. He had a rather pensive look on his face. His eyes were staring straight ahead. John was definitely not here right now. He held a glass of whiskey in his left hand, squeezed the right corner of his mouth, then emptied the glass. John was distracted from his heavy musings by Ashley, who had just entered the office. Catching her husband's gaze, she smiled. He pulled a smile onto his face as well. He didn't want her to see him sad for anyone. And he had someone to be sad about. He thought of Emily, of leaving her, of stopping fighting with her, and it made him feel hard. Honey, could you give me a few minutes? Ashley spoke. She was holding some paperwork. I had a checkup at the doctor's office. We want the baby to be born healthy, right? She fixed John's hair. "Of course, my love," her husband answered her, closing his eyes. "You know, I put your name as my proxy. Sign here, please," she whispered in a soft voice. John, without a second thought, took the pen and, without reading anything, signed his name in the lower right-hand corner. "Thank you, my good man." Ashley leaned over to kiss him. "Are you going to bed, or are you going to stay here a while?" she asked, tucking the papers behind her back. He replied that he would stay a little longer and he would join her in bed. "I'm waiting for you," the mother to be added and left for her room. Ashley put the papers in her bag, then undressed and lay in bed. Her eyes were open. She wasn't going to sleep. She waited for John to come in, but he was in no hurry. He poured the whiskey again, emptied the glass again. He was not feeling well, to say the least. It would seem a happy new wife, a child in the future. But no peace of mind. And he knew it very well himself. He thought about his ex-wife and how she had stopped recognizing him. She'd gotten really bad. John tried to think about the present, about what he had now, but his thoughts kept coming back to Emily. While he was enjoying his new family life, she was slowly fading away, day by day. The next morning, a young doctor entered Emily's room. He was taller than average, had blonde hair and an equally blonde, close-cropped beard. He had started working at the hospice only a week ago. Before that, he had worked in a neighboring town in a polyclinic. However, writing his doctoral thesis forced him to transfer to the hospice for necessary observations. This young doctor naturally had an inquisitive mind. Moreover, he was very quick and qualitative in this direction, from which he was quickly liked by the entire medical staff. The doctor carefully examined the patient, wrote something down in his notebook. His eyes were focused. He glanced again at the patient, whose face had a horrible hue. Vaguely, he recalled how they were taught what to do in cases like this. A line below it, he wrote down the tests he intended to take from this woman. I was about to leave when suddenly I heard a very soft voice. "Wait, stay with me for a while." Emily did not open her eyes, but she knew that someone was with her. She was already so weak that at times consciousness came back to her, and a great sadness and pain came over her at being here. It had been a very long time since she had seen John, but she didn't blame him for that. She realized that there was nothing he could do about her being so sick. It was only the sadness of that realization that filled her soul. "I'm here," the doctor answered. Emily struggled to open her eyes. It seemed to be the first time she had seen this face. "What is your name?" she asked. "My name is Michael George." "Michael to you," he said. "I'll need to run some new tests on you to see what's going on." "Go ahead, doctor, I don't care anymore." "I already know there's only one end," she said with difficulty. The doctor did not answer her. He understood that her condition was grave, but something was definitely confusing him. And the practice he had under his belt told him that this woman might have been misdiagnosed. But when he took all the necessary biomaterials and analyzed them, his hunch was confirmed, and he immediately started the treatment according to the new scheme. And one day when he came to visit Emily, she was already waiting for him. She was still lying in bed, unable to get up. Even so, her mind was clearer. "Good morning," she greeted the doctor. He answered her in the same way. His lips turned up in a smile. "You're in a good mood, I see," he asked as he came closer. As he had all the previous days, the doctor checked her pulse and blood pressure, felt her lymph nodes, and drew blood. Emily held his gaze. "How do I know?" "Your face is very familiar to me," she said suddenly. Michael looked intently into her eyes. "Yes, that's right. I've definitely seen you somewhere before," she said, "but I can't remember where." The long stay in oblivion had weakened her memory a little. "Unfortunately, I can't help you with that. Maybe when you're feeling a little better, you can solve this riddle," Michael replied casually. Suddenly the phrase, "you're asking the riddle," came to Emily's mind. It had been uttered then by the blonde-haired guy in the family circle. Emily's brain went through one picture after another. Things were getting a little confusing. She tried to focus. There were young people in front of her eyes, a blonde, a brunette, and some other man. That's right. There was her husband John and that young Dr. Michael. But how did he end up there with them? Tell me, do you have any family? Maybe brothers or sisters? I remember something, but I'm not sure, Emily said. Really? What is it? Michael grinned. Emily strained again to try to recreate the picture better. But alas. I have to admit, I'm the one who had the misfortune to lose his memory, Michael said. That left Emily stunned. What do you mean, lost your memory? She questioned. Michael wanted to tell her, but at that moment a nurse entered the room and called out to him. We'll talk about this later, okay? Michael said, distracted. Yes, of course, Emily said, smiling at him. The nurse who had called Michael looked at Emily strangely and closed the door without saying anything. The nurse told Michael to go to the head doctor's office. Michael knocked on the office, and after answering, he entered. Have a seat, Michael, said the chief physician. His name was Ben Anderson. Yesterday I wanted to ask about a patient named Emily Johnson. He looked at the doctor carefully. I must say, you've made great strides. And as cynical as it sounds, I'm glad you lost your memory once Ben laughed and prepared to listen to Michael's answer. Yes, sometimes we don't know where fate will take us, he answered. But what I'm wondering is, under what circumstances did this woman come to our hospice? Didn't the other doctors find the real cause of her illness? The strange thing is that the mobility of red blood cells, which had been reduced, became normal again, and the shape began to return to its original form. You, Ben, as a specialist with vast experience, you know that this occurs only in 2 cases. The first we immediately dismiss, and then we're left with the well-known clotting agent. But I don't understand your thinking, Ben Anderson interrupted him. Where are you going with this? Michael was in no hurry to answer. Something told him it was too early to say it out loud. Michael carefully monitored Emily and visited her every day. Despite the serious condition from which she had recovered and stabilized, she was still a person who loved life and had a kind heart toward people. Tell me, why doesn't anyone visit you? He once asked. When he said it, Michael regretted it. His words might have hurt her. She thought for a moment and replied that she didn't know why. I guess it's too hard for my husband to see me like this. Frankly, I've lost track of time. I can't tell you the last time he was here. Maybe a week ago, maybe a month. But I don't blame him. John was with me every day before I got here. He did everything he could to help me. I'm grateful for that. After all, if I hadn't gotten here, I wouldn't have met you, and my recovery wouldn't have begun. And yet your face looks familiar to me, she repeated, scrutinizing Michael. He squinted, as if trying to see something that had come to him. As you said, your husband's name is John? He asked, and seemed to sink further into the past, recognizing himself anew. She nodded, adding that John had a brother. After saying the last word, Emily fell silent. Finally, they looked into each other's faces. It seemed as if something important was about to be revealed, but the door to the room opened again, and Michael was urgently invited into the next room. Emily was left with the persistent feeling that she knew this man for sure and had seen him before. Eventually, she came to the conclusion that this young doctor just looked a lot like Michael, her husband's brother. Same blonde hair, and even his facial expressions were similar, but something was still different. And so far, Emily couldn't figure out exactly what it was that made her think that. On one hand, she seemed to be socializing with Michael, but on the other hand, looking at his face, he was very different from the Michael she had once known. Time went by and Emily was getting better and better each day. Emily could feel new strength literally being added to her. She could feel the blood in her veins developing throughout her body and filling it with warmth. She felt again that she could start doing something next time. When Michael came to see her, she asked him if he could purchase some thread and a hook for her. She had wanted to crochet a backpack for herself for a long time, but had put it off every time. Now she felt that she could crochet it in just a couple of days, and she wanted to make it happen. Look, you're almost completely healthy, her doctor said. And it was true. She had even been moved to another ward because she no longer fit the parameters of a hopelessly ill person. Don't you want to call your husband? After all, you are no longer without strength. You can talk to him about something, Michael suggested to her. But when he saw Emily's saddened look, he realized that it wasn't that simple. I called him, but his phone was always out of range. I don't know what to think. Maybe he left town altogether, Emily said, a little confused. Yeah, that's a little strange. How could a loving husband leave his wife in the hospital and not even be interested in her condition? Michael asked the question aloud and regretted it again. He realized that this topic would hurt his ward. Are you married? Emily asked him in response. She again stumped him because the doctor could not remember the details of his personal life. That's how memory peculiarities work. Michael remembered the names of medications perfectly and was proficient in various therapies. But simple memories from everyday life could not be uncovered. And then Michael had an idea. He asked if Emily remembered the address of the house, and Emily clearly replied that yes, of course she did. Michael then suggested that they go to her house together so that she could visit her husband and find out why he had disappeared from her sight. Emily liked the idea very much. It came as a pleasant surprise to her, and that afternoon at lunchtime they drove to the address. The car slowly parked in the yard. Emily stepped outside and looked around the high-rise building. She was a little nervous because she couldn't know in advance what to expect. Michael got out of the car and offered to go up with her, but Emily declined, saying that she could handle it on her own. He agreed. Emily slowly began to climb up the stairs. Her heart raced with each step up the stairs. When she reached the familiar door with the two numbers 2 and 7 attached to it, she pressed the bell and was ushered in. She pressed the bell and licked her lips in anticipation. She mouthed to herself several times the words she would say to her husband when she met him. All those memories and the days she'd spent with John came vividly back to her mind. She held no grudge against him, but she wanted only one thing: to see him, to talk to him about everything. There was so much she wanted to tell him. She took a breath in and out and pressed the bell, then adjusted her collar and ran her hand through her hair a couple times. Finally, footsteps were heard outside the door, and the next moment the door opened. Instead of John's expected face, Emily saw before her the girl who had been present in her memories. Emily remembered that this was John's brother's girlfriend, so she smiled at her. "Hi, can I come in?" Emily asked, and her voice sounded unsure. The lady who'd opened the door for her wasn't exactly welcoming. She gave her a scornful look and, without saying a word, wanted to close the door in Emily's face. But she had the courage to hold on to the handle. "Ashley, I don't understand you. What's going on?" "I can't go into my own house?" she asked again. "What do you want here?" "This is already my apartment," the new landlady shocked Emily with her words. She grinned, asking if she was joking. After all, Emily hadn't gotten anything wrong. Emily was sure this was her apartment. "Liz, you must be confused about something. It's me, Emily, John's wife. And he's home right now. I need to talk to him." Saying that, she pushed Ashley away and entered the apartment. The latter realized that she would have to make an effort before this fool would realize that she was no one else here. Emily entered the apartment, looking in every room, wanting to find John, but he was nowhere to be found. "What's going on here? Where is John? What's wrong with him?" demandingly asked the guest. "And that's none of your business," Ashley replied rudely. She realized she wasn't going to get rid of her that easily. But the insolent lady had a trump card in her hand. Without a second thought, Ashley went to the closet, pulled out a file folder, threw it on the table, and unfolded it in front of Emily on the right page. "Here, look, everything you wanted to know is printed in black letters in white. Read as much as you can." Saying this, she stepped back a little, crossing her arms over her chest. Emily began to cursorily study the documents with her eyes. The more she read each line, the more horrified she became by the minute. Her eyes rounded. She really didn't know what to say to that. "But how did this happen?" she asked, raising her eyes to Ashley. She silently held out her right hand in front of her. A ring sparkled on her ring finger. "That's not true." "You're lying," Emily said in a raised voice, wishing it was all a lie. "I did call John, didn't I? His phone was off exactly the same as yours." Emily spoke the last words slowly, as if she'd just realized what was wrong. "Did you really set this whole thing up?" Emily questioned. But it was probably rhetorical. Ashley wasn't going to answer her at all. "I don't have to explain anything to you. Whatever you need, I've answered it. I've shown you the documents. Now, if you would be so kind as to leave my apartment." Ashley mumbled and walked to the door, opening it to get Emily out as quickly as possible. But as soon as she opened the door, she was immediately confronted by John. Her surprise took her breath away. She opened her mouth to say something, but nothing came to mind. But John, seeing his ex-wife behind her, who was standing on her own 2 feet and looking fine, was taken aback. "Emily," he said her name as if he hadn't expected it. Emily looked up at him and her eyes involuntarily began to fill with tears. John immediately took a few steps toward her, wanting to hug her, but Emily pulled back for some reason. "Emily, I'll explain everything to you. I was told you were transferred to another facility. I looked for you, but no one could figure out what I was asking of them. I can't believe it. You've recovered," he spoke the words. Emily listened to him, not knowing what to say back, as if it was too late to try to clarify anything now. "Oh God, Emily. Oh God, I'm so sorry," John was saying. Then suddenly he threw himself at her feet. Emily was completely confused. She didn't know what was happening. How could she be so abruptly left without everything? But at the same time she couldn't see her husband, whom she still loved, suffer. "You weakling," Ashley pronounced. She did not recognize the manifestation of human feeling. She believed and was firmly convinced that it was merely a manifestation of weakness of character. Emily told John that she had tried to let him know about her health, but his phone had been off the whole time. John gave her a surprised look, because he was the one who had been calling Emily, and her phone was always busy. He immediately pulled it out and called his ex-wife again. As stated earlier, the answering machine answered. John then went into his phone settings and discovered that someone had blacklisted Emily's phone and had also set a call barring on that number. The first thing John did was turn to Ashley and gave her a questioning stare. She stood there with a nonchalant look. She masterfully kept her mask on, trying not to give herself away. "Okay, John, it doesn't make any sense now," Emily said. "You have a whole new life now, a new wife, a new family. You've even managed to sign the apartment over to her. I'm going to leave, no matter how much you cry here. It's all the same. John's long since fallen out of love with her and started a new life." "What are you talking about?" "I didn't rewrite anything to anyone," the man protested. Emily told him that the document said otherwise, and then asked Ashley to show him the new property certificate again. He didn't believe her, and when he saw the folder of documents in his current wife's hands, he asked to see them. "What a fool you are," she said, grinning. This surprised John even more, who had never seen Ashley in such a role before. "Here. You can watch as long as you want, can't you?" she said mockingly. John took the folder, found the necessary documents, and indeed found there a certificate that his apartment belonged to her. Next, he found another document with his signature on it. The man remembered the day when he was drunk and Ashley had approached him asking him to sign as a trustee. She had said at the time that it was being asked for at the women's health clinic. And then it hit John, it turns out there was no baby in question. And Ashley set this whole thing up just to get a new resource. "Why don't you tell me why you did it?" John asked her. His eyes were filled with horror and indignation. Ashley was starting to get angry. She didn't like being asked to justify herself. It had been a habit ever since she'd been living with William George. He always asked her to account for herself, and often punished her severely. When she tried to lie to him, he was about to call the police to have them both thrown out the door. But at that very moment the doorbell rang, and since the door was unlocked, the guests didn't wait for their hosts to arrive. Michael appeared on the doorstep, and he wasn't alone, he was with the police. Ashley realized there was no escape. How could it be? She miscalculated. She was sure that on the day Michael was supposed to take the plane to Germany, she had put a substance in his coffee in the morning that would cause spontaneity and fainting. She didn't spare the substance then, and poured a lot of it in. Michael had breakfast, drank coffee, and only at the airport he began to feel unwell. He felt dizzy and began to see people who didn't exist. He felt nauseous and went to the toilet. That's where he lost consciousness. He was found only a few hours later. By that time, the plane had long since landed in another country, completely forgetting about the security guard. The police chose to keep silent about the fact that he remained alive. There have been many times crimes of this nature in the city, and the police decided to bring this case to the end and find the culprit, who every time acts according to the same scenario and always gets away with it. Michael remembered everything perfectly. He remembered Ashley, and that he had a brother John and a wife Emily. In order for him to work and not be too conspicuous, he was placed in hospice care where he met Emily. How hard it was for him to keep himself in check so he wouldn't give himself away. The police tried to work on his appearance to make it less recognizable. Special inserts on the movable eyelid and a false chin with a beard and mustache had done the trick. That's why Emily couldn't figure out who was standing in front of her. The police were careful not to spook Ashley. And when Emily and Michael went to her house, the police were already there. And there was nowhere for the perpetrator to go. Ashley was handcuffed and taken to the station. She was not going to be responsible for this alone, and that's why she told everything about William George. But he was more cunning and managed to escape abroad. John and Emily Johnson talked about a lot of things. They had a lot to discuss, found the strength to forgive each other and start living again. And as for Michael, he continued his work as a doctor, putting in his piggy bank of experience one more unique case. When the neighbor, Aunt Zoe, asked if Mary could sleep alone tonight, I had to be honest and say she couldn't. It was frightening to look at her grandmother's empty bed, and impossible not to. The silence rang around to the point of ringing in my ears. Who invented this omen to stop the clock in the house when a person dies in it? My grandmother loved her old clock, its rustling, its sound. When Grandma brought little Mary here, the clock had been here a long time. Mary cried. The first night, Grandma sat on her bed and quietly comforted her. You see, you and I will make a good life together, like girlfriends. I have chosen the coziest corner for your bed. Doesn't the clock bother you? You hear, it soothes you. Mary quietly nudged the pendulum and cried silently. It couldn't be that Grandma was gone. When she had been told as a 6-year-old that Mommy and Daddy were dead, she hadn't believed it for a very long time. Somewhere they must be somewhere now, and therefore someday they will come. That's why she flatly refused to leave their home. She doesn't even remember why she agreed. I guess her grandmother managed to persuade her in some miraculous way. Grandma had a way of doing that. At first, Mary was still terribly afraid that she would be taken away by some of the strangers who appeared in the house after Mom and Dad disappeared. There wasn't a single evil person among them. They were just all complete strangers. She was afraid to even cry in front of them, let alone answer their questions. When they asked her something, she didn't just keep silent, but turned away just in case. That way they would get away from her faster, stop noticing her. One day some aunt pestered her. She said that tomorrow she had to go to kindergarten. Mary turned away and looked at the front door, pretending not to hear anything. Instead, Mary answered some incomprehensible nonsense from their neighbor Eveline with her purple curly head. I'll tell you honestly, I'm not surprised. This is a very spoiled girl. Her upbringing has not been seriously handled by anyone. And just at that moment the front door Mary was looking at opened, and a short, thin woman in blue jeans and white, blue flowered sneakers quietly entered, who heard everything, because she immediately answered something incomprehensible too, even though no one had time to ask her. Come on, are you such a close family friend to judge this, and even more confidently express your opinion out loud? And who are you? Violet Eveline took offense. I'm Mary's grandmother, her daddy's mom. I haven't seen you around here. Grandma. Mary shouted and rushed toward the stranger before she could think of anything, just to escape Eveline. Well, hello, honey, she heard a voice above her and warm hands stroking her hair. Right. It's her daddy's mom. She had the same kind and light hands. Daddy had said so often that Mary had the kindest and most beautiful grandmother that Mary couldn't wait to see her. She had long ago been promised to be taken far away to another town to visit her grandmother. And now Grandma had come herself and turned out to be just that. Papa had never lied. After getting to know her grandmother, Mary immediately stopped being afraid of all the terrible fears. It turned out that she and her grandmother had no one but each other. Mary was overjoyed when she learned that it would be just the two of them. It's so nice that it's just you and me, Grandma. No strangers. Grandpa would have loved you very much too. You can be sure of that, Grandma smiled. She wasn't very happy that it was just the two of them with Mary. There were many pictures of Grandpa in the house, but all in albums and only one on the wall. On it, a young dark-haired uncle, cheerful and strong, sat in a boat, and on his lap held a little boy, a little older than Mary. The boy was very serious, frowning and gripping the oars tightly. Mary immediately recognized that this boy was her daddy. They had pictures of him as a child at home, too. Grandma said here they were fishing. It had been some very fishy summer, and they had had a terrific vacation. And in the early fall, 2 days after returning from vacation, Grandpa was killed in the line of duty. Little Mary was afraid to ask what that execution was, and her grandmother didn't explain. Further family history, sad but in some ways also beautiful, grandmother revealed to the growing up Mary later. Her dad grew up and went to Dallas to study. To her mom's joy and relief, he had absolutely no desire to follow in his father's footsteps, no attraction to any dangerous service, and simply enrolled as a project engineer. Thoughtful and focused Henry was very suitable for this specialty. Everyone around him thought so too. No one expected any adventures from the guy, but he did. He fell in love with a girl from a wealthy family. And he didn't just fall in love for a while, he really fell in love. Everything about him was like that. Both her mother and stepfather were sure that sooner or later she would marry the son of a family friend with whom her stepfather had a business partnership. The lad was indeed very shallow, educated in London, had returned, and was making a significant contribution to his father's business. He was in his late 30s, financially well off. Why not get married? Mom and stepfather at first quietly, then more and more frankly and firmly began to push student Emma to a profitable, prosperous marriage. At first she joked, perhaps too carefully and for a long time, so that the family had time to realize that her refusal not the whim of a spoiled princess, but the time had come to speak seriously. Emma inhaled a little audibly, exhaled noisily and announced, "The thing is, I have another fiancé." "Who is he?" Tumnomno asked Mom, secretly hoping that the beautiful daughter went to her and knows how to find the best of the possible. And Mom was disappointed, extremely disappointed. The groom turned out to be a young engineer, yesterday's graduate of the institute, found a job in a simple construction firm. Everything would be all right, but the groom's mother is the widow of some provincial policeman. And so for this almost rustic, shabby boy, his mother raised Emma her own. Emma with clear skin, a black profile and soft green almond-shaped eyes. Love. But I had it too. I loved your daddy when I married him, who got involved in an obscure project and left me and you penniless. If it wasn't for Jimmy, you'd have grown up in the slums. That's how Mom greeted her daughter's news. Jimmy himself, Mama's husband and benefactor, was brief. "You will marry our friend. We have long agreed." Mom was afraid of his weighty statements, but Emma somehow not. She married her Henry, and her parents fulfilled their promise. They cut her out of the family. Especially since they had another girl growing up, little Helga. Their shared daughter with her stepfather was surely more fortunate and promising than this one, who had inherited from her father. Grandmother Mary said, "I am passing on to you as your mother told me. I add nothing of my own. If you want, you can always look up your mother's side of the family. I once thought it was wrong that they weren't told of your birth. But when your parents died, my matchmakers were notified, just knowing about it just in case. And you decide for yourself. There was nothing to decide. No one had come for Mary except Grandma Ann, so she had no relatives anymore. Now Grandma App is gone, so no one at all. All alone in the whole wide world. Anthony was very supportive. You have to move on, not mourn endlessly, so he consoled the girl and convinced her to go to Chicago. What's there to catch? He's a car mechanic, a beginner, but a good one, with excellent references. If Mary rented their apartment with his grandmother, and he added his savings, and then quickly got a job, they could easily rent a small apartment in a residential neighborhood and still have something left over to live on. Remember, I told you about my ideas before, but you were so afraid to leave your grandmother, as if you were glued to her. And now there's nothing keeping you here. There was nothing holding Mary back now. She wouldn't dare go alone to a strange, unfamiliar city. But Chicago was her mom's hometown. Plus, she'd have Anthony around to keep her company. Aunt Zoe shook her head. "Oh, I don't know. Sure, I'll help rent out the apartment. I'll supervise the tenants. But it's so little, barely enough for a room in St. Petersburg. Life prices are different there, everything. You're just out of college, you have no experience. It'll take you a while to find a job. And live on what? At least here you're at home. And I'll always have a bowl of soup for you if you need it. It's just the two of us. Anthony has thought of everything, made some savings, and he'll find a job with his qualifications right away. We'll certainly live no worse than here. He understands that at first it's all up to him. Aunt Zoe waved her hand back and forth. She got up from her chair, walked around the room, silently, and said, "Your business, grandmother's apartment, is yours alone. And in that sense, there is nothing to be afraid of. But I do not like these fashionable marriages without painting. It's old-fashioned. This is for guys as good and convenient. All these will live and see. Something doesn't suit us, we'll run away and share nothing. You can live with a new one every year. And for us girls, what good is that? Not a wife, not a bride. It's just a trial, temporary. And what hope is there for such a husband? Well, if only he had settled in the city, created, as they call it, a base, and then dragged you with him. But no, he decided to stick to his grandmother's apartment, to make his life easier. And maybe it would be good for you here. You have your own place anyway. And we are all our own. And Grandma Ann would probably say the same thing. You know as well as I do. At the tactless mention of grandmother, one might have taken offense, but Mary took no offense. Grandma would have understood, she replied with conviction. Of course Grandma Ann would understand. She understood a lot more about relationships than the rest of the grown-up aunts. Mary somehow knew that for sure. The other thing was that if Grandma had been alive, Mary wouldn't have dared to move so far away from her. And now it didn't matter anymore. It was as if the stars had taken to helping Mary and Anthony. Surprisingly, quite quickly found decent tenants for a long time, a young couple with a baby. Mary prepared in advance, disassembled and neatly stacked grandmother's wrinkled things, gave them to Aunt Zoya for storage. She took only her watch with her. It's so bulky. Why do you have to bring it with you? Anthony wondered. I'll hang it in our rented apartment so I can have something of my own. Well, if that's the way you want it, let it be, Anthony agreed generously. In Chicago, too, everything worked out as planned. We quickly found both an apartment for the right price and a job for Anthony. True, the apartment was very cramped and nowhere further from the subway, and the job was on the opposite side of town. But that's not a big deal if you don't pick on the little things. Mary put things on the shelves in the closet and hung the grandmother's clock on the wall. Walked around the store at home, made some soup, and sat down at her laptop. She had to look for a job, too. Of course, she has no experience, but in college she took first places in hairdressing, creative competitions. And she has diplomas, and she agrees to the most modest salary, if only there was an opportunity to gain experience. Coming from work, Anthony several days in a row forced the same picture, a clean apartment, dinner on the stove. A focused Mary sending out her resume to salons. Anthony was staunchly against Mary working. He said that if they were saving money, they had enough, and in case of emergency, she could just raise the rent to her tenants. Summer came, and Anthony's conviction that there was no reason for her to work came in handy. Although it was a cool, windy summer with frequent rain, it was still a beautiful summer. The city no longer seemed unprincipled and gray to Mary when there was thick shade, clean greenery in the parks. One day Mary went to the museum and did not notice how she spent 3 hours there. She told Anthony at home over dinner and suggested, let's go together again this weekend. I didn't have time to see and memorize everything there, and then we'll go somewhere else. Why did we come here if we can't see anything? We're here to make money. We didn't come here to spend. Anthony explained condescendingly. I can see it all later if I want to. Anthony was working hard and saving money for some important plans, which he promised to tell me about later. A neighbor on the floor, Helen, with whom Mary had become friendly, thought Mary was lucky to have Anthony. You know how infantile guys are nowadays. You've got a hard-working guy. Take my Jack, for instance. We already have Bruno for 2 years. For my husband, the main thing is his friends, his company. Friends are the center of the world. They always need to throw themselves in, help at the first call. And it doesn't matter that his wife had other plans. She's not bored with the baby either. A son is always fun. They're all selfish. Most of them are. So you're still an okay option. Although you're pretty, you could do better finding someone to take you around. But I don't think so. So yes, your option is very good. Mary felt uncomfortable after Helene's words about the options, even if she didn't feel comfortable saying that she was missing something. She had a completely different idea of their life in Chicago. It seemed to her that they had been together for 100 years and Anthony had stopped loving her truly like he used to. He comes home from work tired, often irritated over nothing, collapses on the sofa waiting for food, and looks at Mary as something that always was, is, and will be. Like the central heating radiators, for example. It's true that he changes at night, especially before the weekend. Remembers that there are affectionate words. Promises that he will definitely think of something interesting for the vacation. It's probably just fatigue and worry. Will he be able to achieve something in a foreign city, in a megalopolis? Of course, it's hard to get accustomed here. Still, it's a lot of work for two. Everything is getting more expensive so soon, and the landlord is hinting at a pay rise. We'll have to find a job after all. At first, Anthony will grumble, but then he'll realize that it's better this way. And he won't have time to be bored and think of all sorts of silly things. And it will be interesting, because a hairdresser is a man of art, no matter how much his lover giggles at IT. Mary thought, consulted, and decided to try a different job search tactic. Nothing gives nothing to go sending out resumes listing prize-winning children's contests from college when there is no experience at all. Probably at the same time 1,000s of the same girls are sending out 1,000s of resumes. Helen advised her to go through the salons herself, in person. And Mary, barely waiting for Anthony to leave for work, went looking for happiness. There were plenty of salons and establishments under the modest sign hairdressers even in walking distance. 4 salons did not show the slightest interest in her, but in a tiny, modest, semi-basement, under the glamorous name of Orchid Bored Brunette, after a short survey, Mary revived. She complained to her guests that her shiftmate was constantly missing work, causing the salon's operations to be disrupted, and promised to tell the owner of the establishment about her. "I can tell by you that you are different. If I put a question to the owner or me or Helga, he will ask her, because he knows very well who is worth what here. He doesn't pay much, so he doesn't have the nerve to expect a supermaster. Our contingent is also local. The same grandmothers and aunts for years. The demands are not very fancy. I bet you've been training on the same neighbors from home. Yeah, well, nothing unexpected. Leave a phone number. I'll call you when I come over. Introduce myself to our dentist. My name." I promised to get him ready. Mary liked Kristen, and the reassurance reassured her. But for some reason the air in the semi-basement room seemed somehow musty, sickly sweet, dizzy and nauseous under her throat. She said goodbye politely and hurried outside, where she barely made it to the far corner of the house before vomiting into the grass. It became a little Pandrucci, but suddenly there was an incomprehensible weakness, as if all the strength suddenly somewhere in an instant went away. Mary was even a little frightened and decided not to go home, but first to Helen to tell her the news. She was happy for her, but marveled at her pallor. Helen shook her head thoughtfully. "I don't want to scare you. It's better to just test right away and rule out the assumption. I have a test lying around somewhere in my medicine cabinet." "What kind of test?" "I don't get it, Mary." "Are you 100% sure you can't be pregnant?" "Then I'm jealous." Helen waved her hands. "Do you think we're from the middle of nowhere?" Mary smiled. "Of course we're using protection." "Aha. I believe every word you say," Helen nodded. "When people tell me how handsome Bruno is, I say, what do you want? It's electronically verified. We planned for later, 5 years from now. But he did it his way. Here I found a test, and don't think about all the horrible things beforehand. Maybe there's nothing. Or maybe there is, but everything will be fine." Why hadn't she thought to ask Helen how best to break the news? Hinting is kind of silly. It's got to be direct. Only at the right moment, not on the doorstep, but when Anthony had eaten dinner and was resting a little. Mary waited until nightfall. And when the lights went out, she whispered in a half-whisper, "Anthony, I'm pregnant." "Are you sure?" "The smells in the barber shop made me sick. Helen gave me a test and it showed 2 stripes. "You're not kidding, are you?" Anthony stretched out peacefully. "You know I don't recognize such stupid jokes." "I'm serious. Helen told me that their Bruno showed up the same way, despite the measures. It's not that uncommon. No method can be completely, 100% trusted." Mary didn't know what to say next. She fell silent, and there was silence. Only her grandmother's clock ticked on the wall. Why was Anthony silent too? Is he gathering his thoughts? Now he would hug her, say, "Don't be afraid, we'll raise the child." I found the problem. I'll solve it. It must have been half an hour before Mary decided to speak again. "Anthony, I'm scared when you don't say anything. I don't want to say it's your fault. So why don't you go to the doctor tomorrow and find out how much it costs to get it out quickly? And I'll give you whatever you need from my savings." She heard some completely alien voice. Mary reached a shivering and frozen hand over her head, fumbled for the switch on the wall sconce, and turned on the light as if she wanted to make sure it was her Anthony. It was him. And he shaded himself from the light with his hand. "Well, what else have you decided to do to me?" "Well, you're not hysterical. Are you going to tell me you want a baby?" "But that's nonsense. Why do we need one? Especially now." Mary tried to catch his eye, but he warded it off with the palm of his hand and curved his mouth unhappily. Her ability to speak suddenly returned to her. "I didn't want anyone, because I didn't think about it. I can't abort. If there's already a child, I'll love it. My grandmother told me that my father was happy when he found out I was coming. Although he and my mom didn't have anything at the time, he just loved her very much. So he loved their baby right away. I mean me. Of course, your dad's the noble knight and I'm the scoundrel. Did you ever think that he hoped to make peace with his rich wife's family by having a child? No, that's life, baby." Mary silently slipped her feet into her flip-flops, went into the kitchen and cried, resting her head on the table. Whether her daddy was counting on it or not, he still couldn't say, "Put that away quickly, Dot." She knows he couldn't. She used to carry a small photograph of him behind the cover of her passport. There Henry and Emma are squatting, holding the handles on both sides of a tiny girl in a crimson jumpsuit. "Stop whimpering," she heard a good-natured voice above her. "Go to sleep tomorrow. If you are afraid yourself, I'll take you to the doctor." "Well, I'm sorry about that. Soon you won't even remember it." "I'm not getting rid of the baby." "Of course you're in favor of creating poverty. I could have guessed that when you were picking up stray cats with kittens." "Only I'm not a stray." Mary interrupted him quietly. "Look, let's you sleep, calm down, and in the morning we'll talk intelligently. I'm at work tired as a dog, and here at home Brazilian series. If you want to talk without drama, call me." Mary watched in silence as Anthony raked the shelves without looking and threw his underwear and clothes into a gym bag. "Don't worry, he'll play free wolf, cool down and come back. He'll ask for forgiveness. The main thing is to pretend that you are mortally offended and convinced that you'll get along just fine without him," Helen exhorted and admonished Magga. "I don't need to pretend I'll get along just fine without him. If not fine, then terrible. I'll still have to get along somehow," Dot grimly assured Mary. "Well, what are you getting down about?" Helen continued to comfort her, not very confidently. Mary interrupted her. "I'm sorry, you're the best. But you don't need any of this. He doesn't need me. I saw it last night. I don't know why I didn't see it before. No, when I was handy, he needed me. Aunt Zoe was right. If I didn't have the money from my grandmother's rent, he wouldn't have brought me here. He would have left alone, promised to come back for me, and disappeared. He's so-and-so is gone now, Dot." Mary could not stand it and burst into tears again, crying and angry with herself for crying, for not being able to linger. It was as if Helen had read her mind. "That's right. Don't be shy with me. Cry as much as you need to so we'll calm down faster. I know what I'm talking about. We fools believe we're loved, that they'll take care of us. Sometimes we're lucky not to be wrong, and often we're not, Dot." Anthony did not return. Calming down, if you could call her quiet, confused state that, Mary considered and realized there were no things left in the apartment for him to come back for. All the little things they had managed to buy in the household mattered only to Mary herself. Anthony had taken his clothes. Was he so afraid of a child that he was willing to sacrifice his comfort to live with a single friend? Mary endured a week and finally dialed his number. "The subscriber's phone is switched off or out of range. Dot. Maybe we should go see him at work after all," Helen reasoned aloud, to whom the confusion had passed. "Do you want me to ask Jack? He won't say no. He's such a chatterbox. It's not hard for him to talk man to man." Find out at least how your Anthony is in tune. Magus raised her eyes to her. She'd lost weight, her face was drained, and her anxious green-brown eyes seemed huge on him. Maybe he's not sure yet. Do you know how cowardly they really are? Yeah, Mary smiled, strained. I'm all out of money. I've gotten into an untouchable transfer from my grandmother's apartment, which I'm using to pay for this place. If I gobble up that money, I won't have anything to pay the landlord here very soon. Next month already. And Anthony knows how the money is, and he doesn't care. What have you and the baby decided? Helen asked cautiously. I don't know what to decide. I'd feed myself, no question, but the baby, how? What are we going to live on when he's born and I can't work yet? I have no one. I don't even have anyone to come to ask to babysit while I work, and I can't get rid of him. Don't look at me like that, I can't, that's all. I think it would be even worse then than it is now. Helen walked around the kitchen, looked in the spice jars for some reason and said, if your creep doesn't show up, you can always go home. At least there's all those aunts there who were friends with your grandmother there to help you out. But it's a last resort to go back without a dime. You've got a very short time. You could get a job here in Chicago. Ideally an official one, of course, with maternity leave and everything. Employers don't like that. When it's all clear, they say you got the job on purpose. But they have their own truth, you have your own. You need to live, and they don't care. But with your profession and no experience, it may not work out that way. So you've got to have something to fall back on. I'll always buy you a meal and feed you. If you don't spend your paycheck, save up some money here and go back to your town with a little money for the first time. Or maybe you'll be lucky enough to find something decent. Then you can stay in Chicago any way you want. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's what I'd do if I were you. Work first, and then we'll see. Mary thought she would too. As soon as she did, her cell phone rang half an hour later. It was Kristen from the Orchid. Mary, hi. Look, I won't tell you over the phone, but I think I have something for you. Our dentist wants to take a look at you. He said he'd be at the dealership by 3 this afternoon, so come on over. You want your papers? I doubt he'll be looking at your papers right away. Well, take your passport just in case. I have no idea what he'll think of our unpredictable. It's a good thing she's not nauseous today, and she looks pretty good. She'd washed her hair, carefully painted her eyes, put on the newest of her weekday dresses, and even slipped into heeled sandals, though she usually ran in more comfortable shoes. By 3 o'clock, she was at the salon. The director had to wait another half hour. Mary was having coffee with Rita and a customer from the next doorway, a bright, fresh, red-haired, cheerful lady. The bosses aren't late, the bosses are late, girls, the lady announced, wiggling funny. She entertained Mary and Kristen with funny life stories, and the wait was neither anxious nor boring. But when the principal did arrive, the hilarious client quickly said goodbye and left. Kristen, instead of mouthing off, you might want to clean this place up for once. Not a quick sweep, but a decent one. I can't believe you don't have time. I can see from your receipts that you have time. This, he said from the doorstep, without anger, with lazy irritation instead of greeting. The director turned out to be a dense, stocky middle-aged man in a bright Hawaiian shirt that was tight on his stomach. Have a cheerful outlook on life, Dennis. Something wrong. Just yesterday I was, smart girl, Kristen sang out. Is this the girl you were telling me about? Dennis changed the subject. Yes, this is Mary, a certified hairdresser with credentials, certificates. Let's give it a try. This girl really needs a job. She's just dying to work. She won't ask for time off. Isn't that right, Mary? Yes, Mary said, trying to be convincing. With a friendly glance at Mary, Dennis chuckled. But the thing is, I don't need another hairdresser. I'd try to get an experienced one, if she's any better than Oli. I won't mess with you, so why did you ask me to come? Mary asked, confused. Kristen gave you a lot of praise. I just wanted to see if you'd like to come. I have a restaurant in addition to this place. Now I need another waitress. Cute and smart, the girl accepted the offer, because even seasonal work is a waitress, but not in the specialty, better than nothing. And so before Mary knew it, she was already working in the Café Violet for the 4th week. Yes, Dennis and his companion Pablo had such a taste for names. The institution was located in the same semi-basement room as the Orchid, but the area was larger. There was 1 cook and an assistant and 2 waitresses per shift. One of the girls had recently graduated and decided to change the job she had held onto while she was a student. Mary was hired in her place. The restaurant was quite cozy, frequented, inexpensive, and the place was quite busy. And the food was good. And one more plus at work, they fed, of course, not the same as the clients, but cheaper and simpler pasta or potatoes with meat, sticky wiener, or chicken leg. At first, Mary was very happy she wouldn't have to spend money on food on weekdays, saving money again. But more and more often, there were days when every trip to the kitchen for an order became a feat for her. The mere smell of food made her sick. Mary worked in shifts 2 days and 2 days from 11 to 23. And you could never guess in the morning how the shift would go. You would fly from morning till evening and chew cabbage, carrots, and apples all day, or barely crawl, holding onto the wall and trying not to look at the food, coming to the kitchen for an order. The doctor at the women's clinic, where Mary was registered under temporary registration, explained that she has toxicosis, and so often happens. In general, it's nothing terrible. Soon it should pass. I wish it would pass soon. Moshet nenormal inyi kukoitu. Nedoverchivo pervala ego Helen. When Ben's cook changes, Mary is calmer. He doesn't notice anything. He doesn't understand it. Like all guys, he thinks it's not much. The girl didn't sleep well. And the cook, Kristen, looks suspiciously, as if she had guessed everything long ago. Mary tried not to think about it, remembering Helen's admonition. You need to take care of your nerves now, or you'll have a lot of trouble later with a nervous child. It's just a job. You've done it, and you're off. You don't care what anyone thinks. Helen herself knew how to do that. She recently came back to work from maternity leave, returned to her accounting department, and told about the naggingly picky chief accountant with laughter, without resentment and worry. Maybe it was a good thing that heat was a rarity in Chicago. It felt heavy with the humidity here. Or was it just Mary who thought so now? But one day on the shift, it got unbearable. Nothing. It would soon be over. She ran into the locker room, behind which was the bathroom, pulled the door open, undid the top 2 buttons of her white work blouse so it wouldn't get dirty. When she was about to get up and go into the hall, she heard behind her back, "Don't make any sudden movements, girl. There are only 2 tables. The waitress will manage without you. Let's make peppermint tea. It helps. I've got a lot of mint growing in my cottage. I'll give it to you at home if you want it. Ginger tea helps with that too, and you should eat more often and sleep more. I've had 2, I know." Kristen looked at Mary without mockery, but without pity, with calm understanding and sympathy. For some reason, Mary felt not scared, but much relieved that she did know. In 10 minutes in the kitchen, while drinking mint tea, she told the cook her whole story. "Svet, are you going to take the groceries?" Pavel inquired behind her back. Mary even forgot that she felt sick, and realized with sober horror that Paul could hear their conversation. This companion, Dennis, young, thin, and silent, frightened her very much. For some reason unpleasant, always comes unheard, such as his gait. With cooks still sometimes greets, even something else will say. The waitresses in general are like furniture to him. They never even dignify him with a word. Mary jumped up at his discovery and happily clung to the elbow of her colleague who appeared in the kitchen. Oops, in the evening Dennis arrived in yet another Hawaiian shirt, and with a particularly heavy odor of booze for Mary. He regarded the girl squeamishly and tiredly and held out an envelope. "Payment is yours for the month. Check it out, it's honest. You don't work anymore. Why?" Mary asked with barely moving lips. How insolent modern girls are, especially those from the periphery like you. What makes you think you have the right to lie and set someone up if you had the foolishness to get pregnant? Something will happen to you at work, and you will go to some labor inspectorate and tell how the bastard director did not register you for work, exploited you, and you will be tired of demanding maternity money. I will not scold you and scare you, so that you do not immediately faint me. I'm just asking you to be quiet for now, and not try to pull something like that. He was almost friendly, without any anger. A smooth, lazy voice. Mary had a lot of things she wanted to say, but kept quiet. She wanted to toss him his money, but silently took the envelope. It would come in handy. It wasn't even for her. The next day, Mary slept most of the day. She woke up twice, drank strong tea in the kitchen, and went back to bed. Nothing wanted to do, nothing to think about. It was as if a dark curtain had fallen over her eyes. And in the evening, Helen rang the doorbell. "Come to our place. Jack is calling you himself. He wants to tell you something." "He didn't send it through me," Helen announced. Jack was sitting in the kitchen, finishing his soup from a deep basin-like bowl. "Mary, I found out something for you. Maybe it'll be good for you." A buddy of mine, Andrew, is a decorator. He recently renovated a private house in the suburbs for a grandfather. The grandfather's house is fine, but he lives alone. He penetrated. He sees that he's a normal, honest kid, and shared that he would rent one room to a woman for the usual household help, and that she was to him as a companion, so even for free. There are all sorts of errands and talk. That's the deal. A favor for a favor. His living conditions are very good. He's not picky about cleaning, cooking. That's what he told me. Andrew says exactly a normal, proper grandfather. Just alone and with money. He says he can always get it through an agency, but he doesn't trust them very much. That's why he asks all his good friends for a recommendation. I thought of you right away. Lying again? Mary asked tiredly. Suddenly a good man, he expects a quiet old age. And I'm here at him bang and suddenly have a baby. And if I find a job again, how will I have time to do his errands? Then you'll have to pay for the room like you're supposed to. Let's Andrew tell him honestly that this is your situation. That's probably the right thing to do. Let him decide for himself. Mary nodded. Even Jack wanted to help her. She'd thought he hated her for being around a lot. That didn't make sense. I don't think it's going to work out, but you have to say thank you and pretend you're hopeful. So she did. Jack went to his Andrew. Helen exhaled noisily and suggested, "Let's have some cherry pie for the night. If you really want it, you can have it once. Go and have a look, you've got nothing to lose. Just take a good look at the landlord." Cunning, of course, the old man, instead of hiring a housekeeper for a salary, is looking for a lodger who will perform the same duties for a room. Don't be shy, just ask directly what exactly you'll have to do. Maybe there's a lot of work involved and it's easier to rent a room for money than do it all every day. To be honest, I couldn't do it. There are 1,000,000 reasons to pick on you, but you still have to see it. On his first day off, Jack took Mary to meet his grandfather, who was renting out a room. According to him, the grandfather was not at all confused by Mary's story. He didn't even ask anything. Helen planned to contact her husband and her friend, thinking of a good excuse to take a walk with the child in the countryside. But Bruno was sick and cranky, and they didn't have time for a walk. Mary imagined for some reason a big wooden house in a clearing like merchants' estates from movies about old life. But the house turned out to be brick, also faced with stone without any flash, but very stylish and beautiful. It was surrounded by a small garden, a few apple and cherry trees without a trace of beds and flower beds. This and through the fence could be seen at once. The fence was not a blank brick wall, but a cunning metal one. The graceful gate was ajar, but Jack was too shy to enter and called on his cell phone. "I've got a girl Mary here to see a room. "Oh, well, let's go inside," Mary dot as they walked down the stone-paved path. They approached the house. The front door opened, and on the threshold appeared the owner himself, holding a large and very shaggy white dog by the collar. From beneath his bangs he scrutinized Magoo and Jack. To realize that the owner was already well over 70, one had to look carefully at his face. Covered with a grid of wrinkles, were deep and sharp, were thinner and smaller. His gaze was quick and sharp, not senile. But its rays softened the wrinkle of his eyes. Not evil, Mary exhaled quietly. And if you didn't look at the face, there's no way you'd think the man was an old man by now. His posture was that of a middle-aged man. With a gaunt figure, there was no hint of decrepitude. Perfectly gray silver hair was cut very short, and a neat beard. In the same way, Gregory invited them into the house. So respectable on the outside, the house was cozy, but a little unusual on the inside. Of course, it was obvious from the many signs that a woman's hand had not been here for a long time, though the owner obviously kept the house in order. But the main thing was that it was as if several different times had gathered in the house. So different was the furniture, even the bedspreads and curtains. In the spacious hallway on the first floor of the XXI century, and in the living room, as if the 19th. It was clear even to Mary that the furniture was antique. She realized it must be rude to stare at everything so intently. Jack, at his host's suggestion, sat down on the edge of the guest sofa and kept modestly quiet. "Do you want to see your room at once, Mary?" asked Gregory. "Have you already decided that I'm the right tenant for you?" Mary was surprised and confused. "Have you already decided that I'm not suitable for you?" laughed the owner. Don't be so quick to judge. Let's see the room. It's right here on the first floor. I myself dine on the second floor. There's a study and a bedroom. The rest of the space is abandoned. It's just an old archive that's piled up. I've been sorting through it, but it's a little light. If you'd like to keep me company, I'd be sincerely grateful. Of course, if you're interested. Come in, Mary. A square room overlooking a window into a cozy corner of the garden. It seemed very warm and cozy, though of the furniture there was only an old, empty chest of drawers, a small table with a mirror, and a bed. We'll find a closet for the outfits, assured the landlord. The curtains, if you don't like them, change them. The main thing is not to tear down the load-bearing walls, and the rest is all negotiable, solvable. I like the room. You just tell me about all your conditions at once in detail. You said you're renting out the place for household help, and I want to know what will be my duties. I'm conscientious. But you know I have some difficulties. What a businesslike girl you are, smiled the owner. Your difficulties, as you put it, do not interfere with me. It may sound strange what I'm going to tell you, but try to understand. I know you have no one. I don't have anyone either. I could hire myself a housekeeper pro and have hired more, but I don't want an uncomfortable stranger professional servant person in the house. I don't have a need for the house to be perfectly cleaned, like for a magazine. And I need to be serviced like a luxury hotel. I need a live person in the house. I like you a lot. I don't like all people. No bigotry in the house. It's all the same. What would you do if I were your dad or grandfather living under the same roof as you? A little bit at a time, depending on your mood. Lest you doubt it, this isn't charity. This kind of work is worth about the price of a house. If you can help with the archives, that would be the most wonderful thing. I'll pay you like a secretary for that. Mary had a very different idea of what it would be like to talk to the landlord. It seemed suspicious that everything was going so well. Well, she'll probably find out the pitfalls later. When can we move in? If your friend Constantine will agree to drive back and forth for your things, then even today go. I'll give you money to stop by. Buy us something for dinner to celebrate the housewarming. Yes, I'll cook dinner, Mary promised. Let's go ask Jack. It turns out that the archive is not dusty and boring, does not make you sleepy. Documents a very interesting thing, as if reading a script. Only it was all real, especially the diaries. They're like living, like magical books, when there were no computers and not everyone had a typewriter, and only at work people just wrote down their thoughts with a pen on paper, and life itself was no easier than it is now. As Gregory said, no, there are a lot of good things now, but it would be better if the old good things stayed. It was very interesting with him in general. Helen was worried that Mary was bored with her old grandfather and asked her to come and visit them more often on weekends. Mary was happy to come and walked around town with her a couple times. And then she was just as happy to come back. Oh, okay, my bunnies, I have to go home, she said last Saturday and was surprised herself. She already thought of this house and the little room in it as her real home, the one she had lived in long ago, and it was as if Granny's clock had always hung on the wall opposite her bed where Gregory had hung it. Not picking on you, Grandpa? Well, about the variety of the menu, or that you put things in the wrong place when cleaning, that you're not neat enough or lazy. What kind of complaints can a grandfather have? Probably like my Jack, only twice as much because of age. To be honest, it's hard for me to imagine Gregory as a picky old man, Mary laughed. As it happens, I don't do anything heavy at all. Just basic stuff, the same stuff I did when I lived with my grandmother. Dinner, simple cleaning. And Gregory takes away my cleaning supplies. If he thinks I should be tired by now, he always spoils me with goodies. He says he bought it for himself, but he barely touches it. Helen, he's an atypical grandfather. There was such a story. There lived a regular old, honored professor, invented various innovations for the Soviet industry and for the military. And he had two favorite students, both of whom had been working with him for many years. And shortly before the 90s, he started some serious project and was very hopeful of advancing it. One of his students worked with him on the technical part of the project, and the other one, who was more persuasive and dodgy, ran through all kinds of authorities to get funding, or some permits. For me, these technical scientific works just a dark forest. I only realized one thing about them: they are very long, and the result is not always as you expect. And so, while these companions were working, the funding ran out and the country was in crisis. Soon there will be nothing to eat. It is unclear who will pay for the work, in general, even if you take everything valuable from home to the pawn shop. And when everything was ready, one of the apprentice companions disappeared. The one with the punching bag, Helen guessed, took all the developments with him and took off. That's what it was all about. Yeah, that's what it was. He left, patented an invention there, in another country, and provided for himself and his children for the rest of his life. And the professor almost had a stroke. He was ill for a long time, barely survived, and when he got back on his feet, his wife also took him to France, persuaded him. She had a close relative living there and married very well. The other student stayed here in Chicago. At first he thought he'd get drunk, but then somehow it all worked out. Talent. It finds a loophole. He met the right businessman, but a very smart one. He began to work for this man, a whole production to him, thought out, and earned good money back in the 90s, and then also received an inheritance from France. It turns out that his favorite friend, a professor, still managed to work there, but for himself. And the professor had no children. He wrote such a will: half of the property to his wife, half to his student and colleague Gregory, where I live. On this old archive, which we're going through now, is the professor's. Gregory carried it around with him everywhere, since he was left his surname as well. The antique furniture was left to him. The professor and his wife could have sold it before they left. It's not cheap, but the professor wanted to leave at least something valuable as a memento of himself to his student. He felt he'd let him down with his earnings and recognition. So when Gregory bought the house, he moved everything in, and now he lives surrounded by those memories. He wants to dismantle the archive, like he owes it to his teacher that someone here remembers him. Listen, why is your Gregory? If there are no heirs around such a wealthy grandfather, then there really is no one. There's something wrong with him, if no auntie's taken him in. He doesn't mention that at all. I don't ask. Maybe if he asked me something personal, I'd ask him, but he doesn't ask me either. I think he's embarrassed. He's so well-bred that he doesn't pry into other people's business. Yes, intellectuals are complicated, Helen confirmed with a knowing look, as if she talked to professors every day. Although, maybe, on the contrary, it's easier to live like that, if all these rules are observed. I won't make predictions, so as not to jinx it, but so far you seem to be lucky. You even look better, even though you're digging in dusty archives. Listen, I'm not intellectual, I'll ask you. Have you heard from Anthony? Helen, I'd be the first to tell you. I have no one in Chicago but you, Jack, and Gregory. Gregory rarely forgets anything, and now he's volunteered to help Mary peel apples for Helen. And it turns out he left his glasses in the office, probably on the desk or on the keyboard of his laptop. I'll be right there. Come on, I'll run in myself. I want to run up the stairs. Mary had only been in the office a few times. It was Gregory's diocese, as he put it, and he tidied it himself, leaving it a comfortable mess, not without logic. Occasionally he'd do a little rearrangement, swapping books on the shelves or statuettes from desk to floor and back again. Now on his antique desk next to his laptop, in addition to his glasses, there was a chessboard with Jask chess and a small photograph in a thin wooden frame. Mary hadn't noticed any pictures in the study before, at least not in any visible places. In the black and white amateur photo, a little girl with 2 ponytails on top of her head is lying on the sand in the surf, laughing and hugging a large striped inflatable ball. Mary remembers every detail of this photo very well. She has the same one in her backpack, in the same folder with her passport, diploma, and several expensive photos. Gregory, the photo of the girl at sea, where did you get it? Mary asked, forgetting her shyness as soon as she went down to the kitchen and handed the landlord her glasses. I took this photo. I was into photography, replied Gregory, looking anxiously into Mary's face as if listening to her strange mood. That's my daughter, Emma. I carry the same picture with me. It came here with me. That's my mom, Emma. Had he found his daughter in time, there would have been someone to support her when her mother turned her away, because his Emma had chosen an unfavorable husband, and his granddaughter, Mary, would have had someone to support, and his son-in-law. Maybe her only real grandmother would still be alive, if her heart had paid for serious treatment. But history does not bear the subjunctive mood. As his teacher and colleague used to say, now we have to live on and live a long time, because soon there will be another tenant in the house who will have to be taken care of for a long time, until he can take care of himself. And it is easy and pleasant to live long, easy and pleasant when you have someone to live for. Helen's voice was tense, and she hadn't called in the evening as usual, but on her lunch hour. Mary, would you mind if I popped straight over to your place after work today? Oh, nothing's wrong. Everything's fine. Just in the mood to see you and chat. There's some little things I need to tell you. Yeah, come over, of course. Especially since Grandpa's going to a class reunion at the Institute, and he's worried about us being alone for so long. What if we need something in his absence, and he's not here? I'll at least reassure him that we won't miss him. Oh, great. Considering all the traffic, I'll be at your place by 8 p.m., Helen promised. Mary sent Grandpa off in a wet asphalt-colored suit, tied his tie, approved of his gentlemanly image, and escorted him to the meeting. She waved a long time after the cab. When she returned to the house, she dressed Emma and went out into the garden with her. In the far sunny corner under an apple tree, unnoticeable from the road, they had set up a real nest. There the grandfather had hung a baby cocoon for Emma. It seemed to Mary that her daughter loved to lie there and watch the sun bunnies playing in the apple leaves. She hummed something softly and amusingly in her own language, and then fell asleep and slept soundly. Whatever sounds came from the road, the clever dog, who knew not to bark now, sat nearby and just breathed noisily. There too, at arm's length, stood a small, elegant garden table and 2 armchairs. She's going to have a beautiful voice, Grandpa laughed in a whisper, raising his index finger to the sky. And she didn't go to the opera and operetta for nothing. When the city and nature became somehow especially dreary in October, Grandpa came up with an entertainment for Mary. What kind of theaters did she like? Mary didn't know which ones, or if she liked them at all. I somehow have not had to be in them yet, she admitted without shyness. We had nothing in our town but the House of Culture. And here I haven't had time. They used to bring some plays there sometimes, but I was never particularly interested in it.ic. What would have been interesting? Grandpa kept up. I like music, Mary confessed, not electronic for disco, but beautiful music that is good for thinking or remembering something. And the grandfather took a season ticket to the theater, and he so fascinated Mary that the grandfather enjoyed spending time there, and the baby's movement she felt there for the first time. The ultrasound showed that it was a girl. Mary knew for sure a girl listens to music with her, swooning during opera arias and singing along. You can say that I'm making it up, but Emma liked Queen of Spades the most, Mary once shared with her grandfather. He looked strangely and kept silent for about 5 minutes, like a deaf mute, as if he was talking to himself but couldn't say it out loud. Only his eyes glittered. Mary only then realized that she had not told him how she had decided to name her girl at once, as she had already called her. Emma was born in February, in a windy blizzard in the night. With balloons and flowers, 3 people greeted them from the maternity hospital, Grandpa and Helen and Jack. Jack drove them home, and it wasn't until the friends left after a small buffet that Grandpa sat down across from Mary and asked, "Maybe you did let Emma's father know she was born after all. What do you think?" "Grandpa, it's been so long since you asked anything about him at all. I thought you never would. You don't want to know anything about him?" "I just saw that you didn't want to talk about him, and now it's that kind of day. Maybe you'll see things differently now." "It's the trouble with people like you that you judge others by your own judgment," Mary objected. "You're right in some ways, but don't forget I'm old. I've learned a few things and gotten over my naivete. Just bring me up to speed, at least briefly, while our girl is asleep." And Mary did. To her surprise, it was not at all hard for her to tell her grandfather about Anthony and how easily he had left her, as if retelling a movie or Dennis. It didn't have the slightest relevance to her anymore. She has a different life with other people in charge. Grandpa agreed with Mary. Everyone who should know about Emma's birth had already been notified. It turned out that Mary only thought the recent past had evaporated completely. She was contacted by Helen. We had a corporate party, a purely female group of people, and the conversation turned to how hard it is to raise a child alone. "I told your story about how you found your grandfather, saying that things are not always so bad. I didn't even say your name, but I told them you were my friend. The girls were surprised, happy for you and your daughter, and cheered up. It would seem that was the end of it. A day later, on Sunday, the doorbell rings. There's your ex on the doorstep, looking anxiously for you. I let him in. Or rather, I was just confused by surprise and forgot that I had to refuse the bore. I said, "What a phenomenon." Then he began to me clearly on the prepared to him script. He understands that I consider him a scoundrel. He fully agrees he is a scoundrel, but only realized everything, and so on in the same style. Probably watched a couple shows as a guide. I sit, nodding, pretending to be touched by his remorse. He sings to me that he would have apologized to you long ago, if you had not changed your phone number and place of residence. He lost track of you, you see. And he only dared to ask me now. He was so ashamed to show up. I was too lazy to ask him tricky questions. I was so disgusted. He thinks I'm a fool. No, I don't pretend to be a smart woman, but not to that extent. I don't know how to get rid of him. Jack was on a fishing trip with Andrew, which would have been easier. Anthony started begging me, "Give me an address. At least give me a phone number." I told him I had my own life and my own business. I had no time to deal with other people's. We haven't talked for a long time. Since we separated, we were just neighbors. Maybe Mary's gone home. Why don't you go to your town if you have to? And he didn't believe me for a second. He started going, "Don't lie to me. I didn't do anything to hurt you." He's angry and about to threaten me, even though it's not good for him. I was lucky there was no bite and Jack got home early. So Jack kicked him out. I talked to him outside and made him promise not to come back. Helen paused for a long sip of frozen coffee, patted the dog's withers, and, without waiting for Mary to comment, continued. "I'm just convinced I was from the beginning that his appearance had something to do with my chatter. And he heard about you at the corporate party, that you were living well, so he decided to try his luck and get a fat piece. It just seems like a big city. In cases like this, you find out it's small. It turns out someone always sees something, hears something, and passes it on to the wrong person. And I'm an accountant. I have a personnel department nearby. I'm friends with our personnel officer. I told her the situation, asked her to look in the profiles where the husbands of those girls who were sitting with us in the company and listening to my story work. We got in, looked at it for a short time. Only 7 of the girls were married. And my hunch was right. Kate from sales has her husband's place of employment on her profile, just like your Anthony. You said the name, and I remember things like that. Remember when we were laughing? It's too much of a match. Didn't I mention you were my roommate the other day? Mary, I'm sorry, and keep in mind he might show up." "Oh, come on." Mary smiled, trying to be as serene as possible. "You've made such a detective out of nothing, even going into the personnel records. It wasn't your fault. You couldn't have foreseen anything, you just told me in the mood. I've always loved hearing other girls' stories, too. I didn't think there was anything wrong with it. If you don't gossip, don't say nasty things behind your back, and just talk about a person, it's okay. Thank you so much for not being mad at me. I'd understand if you were mad at me. Are you going to do anything about it?" "What do you mean?" "I don't get it, Mary." "Shoving my stuff in my suitcase and running off somewhere. No one came to see me. Even if Anthony somehow finds out where I live, it's not like he's going to come here. Unless you told him it's a threesome. Maybe he's picturing a mansion with columns, an alarm system, a panic button, and a couple of grim bodyguards." "Yeah, I didn't mention that," Helen exhaled with a sigh of relief. "Oh, I even said that you have a gorgeous dog, a sheepdog. By the way, this breed is considered unpredictable and aggressive. By the way, you do have an alarm system, don't you?" Grandpa returned home lively, satisfied with the meeting with old friends. He joked, retold stories of his classmates, sent greetings from them to his granddaughter and great-granddaughter, and announced that he had missed them. Mary would not tell him about the incident with the girl's father. Not right, if only he would take care of her and Emma. He needs to be taken care of too, and there's no one else to do it but her. Of course she was scared at first, but just a little bit and at first. Anthony is not a villain or a criminal mastermind, but an ordinary selfish guy. Nothing to be afraid of at all. She'll think of something if he shows up. A month later, Mary almost forgot about the warning Helen she had no time to think about unpleasant things. Her daughter grew up, already sat in the crib and stroller, tried to sit even in a soft cocoon. When she saw the dog, she was happy and stretched her arms to him, trying to run them into his shaggy fur. "Don't worry," Grandpa reassured her confidently. He understands perfectly well that it's a puppy. Helen came almost every weekend with her son, and sometimes with Jack. But Mary also had a sudden urge to go to Chicago. Grandpa was supportive. "The baby's over 6 months old now. It's time for you to go out. Go out with Helen, at least just a carefree summer cafe. Moms need to rest too. Why don't you pump your milk and I'll feed just fine without you." I quietly read the literature about children and control, quietly the process of cultivation and upbringing. Grandpa grinned, and Mary went to Helen's house. They did not sit in an outdoor cafe and walked around the zoo, but still had a great time. They talked about coming here with Emma very soon and showing her bigger animals than sheepdogs, which would be interesting. They talked about when Emma gets a little older, Mary is going to open up a little beauty parlor. Grandpa wants to help her start a business she enjoys, and it would just be great if Helen would agree to do the bookkeeping there. They did laps of the zoo 3 times. Bruno didn't want to leave. When we managed to get him out, we bought ice cream and sat on a park bench with him. Mary took a bite of the ice cream with pleasure and heard a half-forgotten familiar voice from the side. She shuddered. It seemed to her that Helen did too. Bruno was running around the flower beds, eating his ice cream on the run. Anthony stepped out of the shade of a tree and stood in front of them. "Mary, hello. We have to go." Helen rushed over. "We're late. Let's go. "I'm listening." The last kindly indifferent words were meant for Anthony. "Where's our daughter?" he asked, making a worried face. "We don't have anything of ours," Mary explained peacefully. "I'm sorry if you can. I need you, you and your daughter. It just took me a long time to realize it. I'll do anything for you. If you'll let me try to start over. Helen told you I was looking for you, didn't she?" Helen stood aside by the flower bed and listened, not even pulling away from Bruno, who was jumping around her. Mary wrinkled her nose slightly. "Very, very theatrical. I have nothing to forgive you. It was the right thing to do. Thank you for your daughter. She's beautiful." "What do you mean?" Anthony said in a muffled voice, with reproach and admiration at the same time. "I don't hold a grudge, Anthony. And I won't be filing for alimony. Don't worry. You'll still have all your savings." "Mary, don't do this to me. You couldn't have gotten over it so fast. I know you. It wouldn't have been you. People don't change that fast. And we have a daughter, and you won't even let me look at her. I know you found your grandfather, but that's not the father. I'm not giving up until you give me a chance." Now he will play the macho man who has decided to fight for his love. Mary got up from the bench, slowly walked around Anthony, lightly stroked his shoulder. She made sure he took it as a good sign, and said in the same secure, peaceful, and calm voice, "People change. People change and fast, too, when circumstances force them to. I know you're aware of my financial changes, so you're under no illusions. I'm glad I wasn't married to you by the time I found my grandfather. You can find a much better option with an inheritance, even with a child. One more piece of advice. If you decide to look for me or my daughter, in any way to let me know about myself, you know who, what, and how in the 90s earned, with whom you had to communicate. The acquaintances of my grandfather and now of me are corresponding. My grandfather owes a lot to the reputable Mr. Jacobson. If that name means anything to you, people like that don't take away their protection for no reason. You can always turn to them to get rid of unwanted nuisances like you, Anthony. It's nothing personal. Consider it a sign of forgiveness." "Bitch." Anthony exhaled angrily into her ear and staggered back, just in case. He turned around and walked across the lawn toward the zoo. "Now he's going to disappear from the horizon," Helen said. "Listen, I wasn't expecting you. Have you really changed? I felt that I'm not alone in the world, and I've changed." "I know." "Mary, who's Jacobson? You never told me about him. Is he the guy your grandfather invented the production lines for?" "I don't even know his name. I just made him up." Passers-by turned around, some irritated, but most smiled. How cheerful, infectious laughter of these young, beautiful girls, and the baby runs around them so happy. Jack came to pick them up, as arranged. "Oh," I could hardly get through the traffic, he exhaled. Can you imagine? Some uncle jumped up to Andrew and me while we were fishing and began to claim with a pompous attitude that we had taken his permanent place. That's the first time that's ever happened. And you know me, if he'd asked nicely, we'd have left. And you'd go to Mr. Jacobson, Helen joked. Who the hell is that? No idea. We just made him up. He's supposed to be a powerful friend of my grandfather's. Oh, girls, you're so grown up with children and you're still joking. I'll tell my grandfather that you've invented some dubious acquaintances. The group of people, laughing and smiling, continued walking through the park. Jennifer loved this time of year. She could run quietly along the park's paths, breathing in the fresh scent of grass and flowering trees, still warm from the summer heat. And if you go out very early in the morning at 6 o'clock when the sun is just rising, then the pleasant coolness will help to make your morning jog more intense. Besides, not many people like to get up early, and Jennifer liked that. She didn't even take her headphones with her on her jog. She listened to the rustling of the trees and the singing of waking birds. Sometimes squirrels ran, and mice rustled in last year's leaves. The girl could stop and watch the animals. Toward the middle of her training, dog owners came out for a walk with their pets. Some of them Jennifer recognized, as she had met them time and time again. They nodded their greetings and silently went their separate ways. She had started running in high school with a friend. Sandy had decided in her senior year of high school to lose weight for graduation. She was bored with running alone, so she called Jennifer. Jennifer didn't need to lose weight, she was already slim and agile. But how could she not help her friend? But then Sandy got sick, then she stayed up late, then she had important things to do in the morning. In general, there were many excuses, and Sandy's desire to go jogging in the mornings waned. Jennifer, on the other hand, got into it. She felt good after the run, and over time, those 5 to 7 kilometers became a habit. Therefore, even when she moved to another city, she was very happy to find a large park with cozy benches and forest paths near her rented apartment. This morning she ran at an easy pace, as she had missed the previous 2 runs, and didn't want to overload her body before a hard day's work. Through her musings, she heard a rather heavy stomping behind her. "I finally caught up with you," said the young man with a puff of breath. "How fast you run." "No, I'm in no hurry," replied Jennifer. "I don't know. I could hardly get close to you. Maybe you're out of shape today." "Maybe," Jennifer suggested. "I've been out of shape every day lately." "Oh, I'm sorry," the man said. "My name is Mike." "Jennifer. Nice to meet you. I've noticed you running around here in the mornings for a long time. Only usually you're back by the time I get out. Well, today we were lucky enough to get out together. Where are you going?" They were approaching a fork in the road toward a new street. "Oh, great. Mind if I come with you?" "Of course not. If it's easier for you. It's much harder for me. But it's time to get back in shape." As they ran up the road together, Jennifer stopped and turned off the tracker. "I'm done." "Then I'm done too. Can I go jogging with you again tomorrow?" "Please, 6:30. On this bench here, I'll stretch a little bit first, and then I'll run. Just please don't be late. I'm on the clock." "No way." The next morning, when Jennifer arrived at the park, Mike was already waiting for her at the agreed place. They started their warm-up together. "How long have you been running?" Mike asked. "More than 5 years. I started in high school." "And you?" "I've been running since I was about 10. Then, however, after high school, I gave it up. But this year I decided to start again. And you know why?" "Why?" "I just saw how you run here every morning with a smile, and frankly speaking, I envied you myself. I've been in a bad mood every morning lately. I thought maybe starting it off with a jog might help." "Of course it would. It's the only thing that makes me feel better. Just positive vibes." After warming up, Jennifer ran her usual route again. She tried not to run very fast, but to keep a steady pace so that the young man wouldn't fall behind very much. Mike tried his best to keep up with the girl, but by the 6th kilometer he was finally exhausted. "Do you mind if I quit today?" "Of course not. You can run your own route at your own pace. I'd love to do it with you. I just don't have that kind of training yet. Tomorrow, same place, same time." "Yeah, see you then." And Jennifer ran easily ahead. Mike really waited for the girl at the appointed place every day. He ran with her more and more. Gradually, they were getting into the suggested pace. After a couple of weeks, Jennifer already stopped restraining her speed, and the young man kept up with her. "You're getting in shape fast, aren't you?" She praised Mike after the next session. "Thanks to you, my beautiful sparring partner. Can I walk you home today? Aren't you in a hurry to get to work?" "Not today. I'm on vacation." "Wow. Why don't you get some sleep or go somewhere else?" "I have a lot to do here, but I can spend more time jogging every morning." "Well, that's great. Soon you'll be leaving me behind." Why would I want to leave such pleasant company? Now Mike walked Jennifer to the front door every time. It was about 10 minutes from the park to her house, and during that time they chatted about the weather, their activities, and life. That's how Jennifer learned that Mike works as a financial analyst and lives on the other side of the park. He has a car, which he sometimes uses to drive out of town to his dacha, where his parents live year-round. The more the girl talked to him, the more he charmed her with his knowledge, competent speech, friendliness. And the man himself turned out to be handsome. "Just don't fall in love," she said to herself as she recalled her morning jogs during the day. "You don't want that to happen now." But the more often she repeated this mantra to herself, the harder it was for her not to remember her morning companion. On their day off, after another workout, they walked up to the driveway. "I can buy you a delicious morning coffee," Jennifer offered her companion. And at that moment she thought with horror, why am I saying this? I wish he'd say no, and she was greatly relieved when Mike agreed with pleasure. They went into the apartment. Jennifer invited her guest into the kitchen and put the coffee maker on. "Do you mind?" "I'm going to take a shower for now," she asked. "No, of course I feel at home," Mike laughed. The girl giggled and went into the bathroom. The next time they went jogging, they got caught in a heavy rain. And after they went up to Jennifer's house, she suggested that the man go into the bathroom to wash his feet, which were covered in mud. "Could I stay?" he asked. "You don't worry. I'll be quick." Sure, Jennifer gave him a towel. Drinking coffee on weekends after a run had become their tradition. They took turns in the shower, too, until one day they bumped into each other in the doorway, and the girl felt the urge to snuggle up to the man. Mike put his arm around her lightly and began kissing her, at first gently, and then realizing that the girl did not resist, more and more insistently and passionately. It was then, after their first intimacy, that Jennifer learned that Mike was married. "I probably shouldn't have done that," he murmured, cuddling the girl in bed. "You didn't like it?" She was upset. "No, it felt really good. You know, how can I put it? Well, it turns out I cheated on my wife." "So you're married?" She jumped up on the bed. "Why didn't you tell me before?" "Well, somehow I didn't have to. As it is about my parents at the dacha told me about the car too. And about my wife I didn't have a chance." "Do you have kids?" "Yes, 2 daughters. So pack up and get out of here. And don't let me see you around me again." "But why?" "I'm so sorry I didn't warn you. I didn't think it would go this far. And then I couldn't stop. You're so beautiful." "Is that why you decided to deceive me?" "I didn't decide anything." Jennifer was sitting in the kitchen, staring off into the distance. How did this happen? She thought. Why didn't I ask him right away? Why did I let it come to this? Then she remembered how attracted she had been to Mike and felt even more remorseful. When Jennifer was a little girl, her father, who called her the most wonderful daughter in the world, suddenly left her mother for another woman. Jennifer then did not understand the complex parental relationships, but fiercely hated her father's new girlfriend. As a teenager, she firmly decided for herself that she would not have affairs with married men. She didn't want other children to experience what she had when her father left. And now she found herself in the position of a mistress herself. Jennifer decided not to cross paths with Mike anymore and began to figure out how she could change the time or route of her runs. The next day, she didn't see anyone. And then she didn't either. On the one hand, the girl was glad that she was no longer tempted, but on the other hand, she resented the fact that she was so easily forgotten after the first time. No more meetings or phone calls. On Saturday, she went into the entrance and suddenly found Mike at the door of his apartment in his usual clothes with a large bouquet in his hands. He rushed over to the girl. "I'm so sorry, please, I didn't know this would happen. I realized I really want to be with you. Don't chase me away, and listen to me." Jennifer stopped at the stairs, but realized that there was no way she was going to get into the apartment unless she talked to Mike. "Why are you here?" "I wanted to apologize. These are for you." He held out the flowers. "You're the best, and I feel really bad without you." "Thank you," Jennifer answered dryly, but her heart was jumping with joy. "Let me through." She walked over and opened the door. "May I wash my hands?" the man asked modestly. "I got them dirty while I was waiting for you." The girl shrugged her shoulders. "Come in." Mike went into the bathroom. Jennifer started looking for a vase, which she didn't remember where she had put away since she hadn't received flowers as a gift in a long time. As she bent down to look for the vase in the nightstand, Mike came up behind her and put his arm around her. "Let go," she tried to pull away. He squeezed her even tighter. "I'm sorry, I can't do this without you." The girl resisted, but at some point she suddenly realized that she too wanted everything to happen again. She turned and kissed the man. All principles went to waste. Mike rarely showed up for a run now, but he was always waiting for her outside her driveway or apartment. They would go in, tear each other's clothes off with fury, and make love to exhaustion. Then reluctantly they would pull away from each other, and the man would leave. And Jennifer went about her daily business. Every workday she looked forward to the weekend and a new date. You convinced yourself not to fall in love. And not only did you completely dissolve into this man, but you broke your own rules. He's married and has daughters. And you are just a mistress with whom he is resting from family boredom, the girl thought. She was about to come to terms with her situation when she suddenly discovered that she was pregnant. This was not part of her plans at all. Her salary was barely enough for a rented apartment and life. And then there was a baby. The girl decided to have an abortion. Only there was a problem: the procedure was done for a fee, and Jennifer did not have the means. So she decided to tell Mike about the pregnancy. He is also involved in her situation. When the man came to her once again, after intimacy, she said, "I'm pregnant." What he asked her again: "I feel so good with you that I got pregnant. I have to have an abortion, but I don't have the money. Will you help pay for it?" "What abortion?" Mike exclaimed. "It's beautiful. I love you and the baby so much. Give me a son, please. I only have 2 daughters. May you and I have a son." Mike looked at the girl pleadingly. She was very surprised at his reaction, which she had not expected from a married man. Jennifer assumed that there would be a scandal, threats, the breakup of the relationship. But the joy of it completely threw her off balance. "But how, Mike? You're married, aren't you? What kind of son would I have? How am I supposed to raise him? I can barely make a living on my own." "I'll help you. I'll get a nanny. I'll give you money. I can't get a divorce, but I will recognize the child. Please don't have an abortion. Give me a little boy, my dear." "I'll think about it," Jennifer said. And indeed, she thought for a long time. The girl went to the doctor, clarified the deadline by which she had to make a decision, and thought about what she should do. On the one hand, she realized that all the care of the child would fall on her. Mike would only be a Sunday dad. On the other hand, she loved this man so much that somewhere inside she was thinking, "I will give birth to his son. He will see how good we are together, and will definitely divorce and come to live with me through the prism of his love." There was no way Jennifer could adequately evaluate her actions. She needed to consult someone, so she called Sandy, her best friend, who by that time already had a husband and a child. "You're a piece of work," was the first thing her friend said when she heard the news from Jennifer. "And who's the daddy?" "That's not the point. That's not the point. I'm not getting married. I want an abortion. And he's telling me to keep the baby." "Are you crazy? What abortion? Of course you should have the baby. You don't know how happy it is to look at a little person who loves you for nothing. When I look at Mikey, I'm filled with love too." "Sandy, you're married. What if I have a baby and I have to raise it alone in a rented apartment with a small salary? I can't afford it. Isn't your dad planning on helping out? They promised to provide. But I can't rely on that. I don't know what anyone's saying. I don't know, Jennifer. They say there's a bunny. There's a law and I can't support you in your decision to have an abortion. I look at Mikey and I think, how could this be? It wouldn't be such a miracle. Okay, thanks. At least I talked to someone. Come on, I'll keep thinking. I still don't think I should terminate the pregnancy. I haven't made up my mind yet. When Mike found out about Jennifer's pregnancy, he became even more alert and attentive. He came much more often and constantly asked what her plans were. In the end, the girl believed that the man would not abandon her with her son. And even without voicing the decision to herself, she as if by accident missed all the deadlines for abortion. When else can I have an abortion? She asked. Mike was very happy. I'm going to have a son, he murmured as he nursed Jennifer back to health, giving her money for doctors and vitamins and accompanying her to checkups. Jennifer was terrified of what would happen if she had a daughter. But at the next ultrasound, the doctor confirmed her father's hunch. You're having a son, Mommy, she said to Jennifer lying on the couch. Jennifer smiled. I'm starting to believe that after the baby is born, things will get better. She took maternity leave from work, and the following spring Jennifer had a baby boy who looked a lot like Mike. She named her son Stephen. There was a dash in the father's name. I'm definitely going to adopt him, Mike said, but only a little later. Okay, sweetheart. Look at the little guy. The older the boy got, the less often Mike showed up at Jennifer's house, and the less money he gave her. It got to the point where she couldn't afford to buy formula for her son. So she called the man she loved. Why are you calling me? He got angry at the young mom. You don't realize that if I don't show up, it means I can't. And in general, I now have financial problems. I cannot support another child. You gave birth to it. You have to raise it yourself. Oh yeah? You said we'd raise it together. I don't have enough allowance. I don't know what I said. I don't have time for you right now. I'll come if I can. Don't call me again. Jennifer sat by the baby's crib, quietly holding back tears so as not to wake the baby. Well, what am I going to do, she thought. I shouldn't have trusted the man, no matter how sweet the promises he made. She felt bad for herself, for her son, and for the fact that she had been so foolish to rely on a complete stranger who had deceived her and was also rude. When the girl calmed down a little, she began to think about how to live on. Marilyn was very surprised to receive a call from her apartment at an unannounced time. Usually Jennifer only called her to inform her of a rent transfer. But now was clearly a different number. Oh, my heart smells something's up, the woman thought as she picked up the phone. Hello, Jennifer. Marilyn, please excuse me. I'm having temporary financial difficulties right now. Could you please hold off on paying me this month? Oh, that's a shame. I've been planning what I'm going to use the money for, but I'll wait until a better time. Something came up. It's not a big deal. It's just that my paycheck's late at work. All right, Jennifer, just let me know when you send me the full amount. I will, Marilyn. Thank you so much. Goodbye, darling. Starling. The woman hung up the phone and, shaking her head, muttered, something must have happened after all. Entering the room, Maxim asked her, what did you say? He had just arrived to help with the move to the dacha for the summer season. No, nothing. The girl who rents my apartment asked for an extension. She says she's behind on her paycheck. You know, I was thinking, I'll leave you her phone number. You check her out sometime. Mike, okay. Just make sure there's nothing wrong with it, nothing illegal. It's her first time filming, but there's a first time for everything. Marilyn, okay, son, don't worry, I'll take care of it. I've already taken her stuff out to the elevator, so it's time to get dressed. Marilyn went to her room to put her medication in her bag and dress warmly. It was a chilly start to summer. After talking to the landlady, Jennifer immediately pulled out the money she had set aside for rent, got dressed and went with the baby to the store to get formula. But this is only temporary, just for once, she thought. What to do next? To get a job, you need a nanny. But what kind of nanny if I can't even buy pantyhose on my paycheck? When she returned with boxes of food for her son and put him to sleep in the stroller on the balcony, The girl picked up her phone and dialed a number. "Emily, hello, I'd like to get off vacation next month." "That's fine, Jennifer. We're waiting for you. But we're not getting any pay raises, and we're running out of money." "Yes, but I need a nanny to go to work." "Well, I'm sorry, I can't make you happy. We're having problems at the company right now, even layoffs. You're lucky you're legally exempt. But frankly, it's not good." "What if I go part-time and find a part-time job somewhere else? They won't fire me." "Why would you and I have to go public with this? We won't tell anyone. And besides, you'll have child support. It's a small amount, but it'll be a better income. And, I can write you a quarterly welfare check. I don't think it would be a bad idea." "What about layoffs?" "The financial aid is under another article, so one can't interfere with the other." "Oh, thank you, Emily. Then I'll come to work with you soon, of course." Jennifer worked as an assistant in the economics department. She had no specialized training. When she joined the company as a secretary, her smartness was quickly noticed, and she was offered the position with a small salary increase. Jennifer was pleased, because she preferred to work with papers rather than to meet people and prepare tea and coffee for the bosses. And the first person who helped her to get used to the new place was Emily, the head of the HR department. Jennifer was grateful to her and was always happy to come into her office. Now, after the conversation, she hung up the phone and felt ashamed of her request. But perhaps Emily was the only person in whose decency Jennifer was sure. In the evening, when the girl had just put her son to bed, the front doorbell suddenly rang loudly. Well, who has brought resented inwardly the girl? Son, after all, will wake up in her soul. There was still a lingering hope that Mike, who had not appeared or called for more than a month. On the threshold stood an unfamiliar man about 30 to 35 years old. "Jennifer, hi. I'm Ben, Amber's son." "Hi. Come on in." "I'm sorry I didn't call. My mom left me your number." "Well, I was just driving by, so I thought I'd stop by." "Maybe you're home." "Are you here for the money?" "I thought we agreed with your mom about an extension." "No, I'm not here for the payment. She said she put it off. It's just that I took her to the cottage the other day, and she asked me to stop by and see if I needed any help. A leaky faucet or a loose knob. It's an old apartment, after all." That's when the baby cried in the room. "Oh, wait a second," Jennifer rushed to her son. She rocked the baby's crib and he calmed down. "You have a baby?" Surprised son of the hostess. And here I was making a fuss. I woke him up. "I'm sorry, but my mom didn't warn me." Jennifer lowered her eyes. When she'd met Amber, it had only been about renting an apartment. She'd said, "Oh, it's so nice that you're alone. No dogs or kids or anything like that. Otherwise they'll trash the whole apartment, chew up the furniture. The kids will draw on the wallpaper." "I'm alone," Jennifer laughed at the time. "And I don't plan to have any dogs or kids yet." "That's fine," the woman said. "Then I'll be happy to rent you a place to live," and she signed the contract. "Son," Jennifer answered Max's question. "He's 5 months old. Your mom doesn't know yet." I didn't have the heart to tell her. "Congratulations. Are you going to live here as a family now, or are you going to move in with your husband?" "I don't have a husband," Jennifer said, and went all in. "That's why I asked your mom to postpone the payment. I have nothing but my allowance right now. But I've already made a deal, and next month I'll start working. Then I'll be able to pay off my debt and keep paying." "And who will take care of the child?" the man asked. "A nanny, probably," sighed the girl. "But I haven't found one yet. They all ask for my salary for this, and I still have to pay you and feed my son something. But I'll definitely manage, don't you think?" "Just wait a bit, I'll pay you. I'm looking for a second job. Maybe I'll clean the entrances of our house. Then I won't need a nanny. I can babysit for my neighbor." "Can I sit down?" Max asked, and without waiting for permission, settled on a bench in the hallway. "And what do you work?" "Assistant economist." "We have a good company. I've already talked to the head of the personnel department. She promised me a quarterly financial aid, and I can leave work early." "How much do you expect to make, if it's no secret?" Jennifer gave me a number. "Do you think it's enough money for 2 people with a baby to live in a rented apartment?" Max wondered. "It will be difficult, but I can do it," she answered. "Parents, relatives, friends, finally? Make the father pay child support?" Jennifer shook her head negatively. "He's married. He has 2 daughters. He didn't care about aesthetics. And when you decided to have a baby, excuse me, what were you thinking? Mike asked for a son and promised he'd help and adopt him. And you believed him? I see. Well, can we see the hero of this soap opera? Jennifer nodded and quietly led Ben into the room where the round baby was sleeping and smiling on the couch, covered with blankets so he wouldn't fall. The man couldn't hold back a smile, reached out a hand to him, then pulled it away and walked back out into the hallway. What am I going to do with you? He looked anxiously around the apartment. Jennifer. I think she'll be kicked out of the apartment soon, she asked quietly. Can I stay here for a couple more months, till I find another place to live? I don't have anywhere else to go, only to the street. No, I won't kick you out. I'm thinking about how to handle this situation. Let's do this. I won't say anything to my mom yet. For the next couple of months, I'll pay it myself and tell her as if you did it. But in return, you'll give me the coordinates of your work so I can see if you're telling me the truth. I'm sorry, but these are the times. Of course I understand. And then when you get a job, get a nanny and get your life together, then we can talk about payments again. Okay. Chuckles, thank you so much, Ben. I didn't expect you to be so understanding. I thought you'd just send me out the door. I want to help you regain your faith in people. Not everyone's a scoundrel like your Mike. He's not a scoundrel. He just can't leave his family for us. It's a testament to his integrity. Yeah, it's his integrity that made him choose to leave you. Okay, I hate to talk about him. Here's my phone number. If you need any help, call me and I'll try to solve the problem. Have a good day. The man walked out the door. Goodbye. And thank you again. Back home, Ben had dinner and tried to read the news on the internet. There was only one problem: he didn't realize what he was reading because he was mentally going back to his conversation with Jennifer. No, it was understandable that a naive fool trusted some scoundrel. But how on earth does a guy like that get around? At home, he's probably a good family man. Tells stories from work, goes for walks with his daughters, and does not think that someone can do the same to them when they grow up. And now she's got to get out of it. In a week to visit her, at least bring diapers and baby food. It'll be easier. But at the end of the week, Jennifer called. Hello, Ben. You said that if something broke. Yeah. What's wrong, Jennifer? The washing machine. It's broken, and it won't heat the laundry. And I'm like a handicap without it, aren't I? But you understand. I understand perfectly. When will you be home tomorrow? All day. Where will I go? I haven't gotten a job yet, and I haven't found a nanny yet. I'll take the baby for walks. But if necessary, he can sleep in the stroller on the balcony. Right, Ben's mind flashed. She needs a crib, too. Her son sleeps on her couch. Our old, beat-up couch, the one his father remembers. First of all, don't wait up for me. Just do your thing. Just make some room around the car. All right. Okay, I got it. Ben worked at a publishing house where most of the staff worked remotely, only occasionally coming into the office. However, they all shared a chat room where he'd thrown in the need for a crib. Within a couple hours, he received 3 offers to give it away for free with pictures. After looking at them carefully, he chose one. Ben drove up the same day and picked up the crib. In addition, he received several rattles, a pacifier, and other baby accessories. Heading to the office, he was pleased with the future surprise for Jennifer and her son. In addition, he also ordered a washing machine with delivery. To put in a new one, the old one was already more expensive to repair. Ben, did you get married? Jacob, an old acquaintance and editor of the publishing house, greeted him. No. Why would you say that? What about the chat room newsletter? Or do you need this as a prop? No, it's not for me. It's just some girls I know who need help. Girls? But that means you're getting married soon, his colleague winked at him. I didn't think so, Ben smiled. On Saturday, as soon as the delivery guy called and said they'd be there in an hour and a half, Ben rushed to Jennifer's house. She was just feeding her son when he arrived, laden with a disassembled crib and other things. Don't get distracted by me, the young man said to the girl. I'll get everything out of the car, and only then I'll do the washing machine. Okay, Jennifer nodded, continuing to coax the baby to eat the applesauce she had just made from the last remaining apple. And in good conscience, she should have had time to go to the store today. But she didn't bother telling Ben that. The man brought in all his things, undressed, and made his way to the room. Jennifer could hear him moving furniture from the kitchen and wondered, not realizing what he was doing. Maybe Amber asked me to find something, she thought. Then Jennifer heard the sound of an instrument, took her son in her arms, and went with him into the room. Ben had assembled the crib and fastened the sides to it. There was already a crib mattress and blanket inside. Ben, why? We were doing just fine without a crib. It's just a waste. You're not going to need a crib anytime soon, are you? At least until the age of 2, a child shouldn't be ruining his spine sleeping on an unequipped couch. I didn't spend any money. My coworkers gave it to me for free. Their daughter had grown up. They didn't know where to put her. And a lot of other rattles. The man nodded at the big bag in the corner, and in the hallway, 2 packages of diapers. These are a gift from me. Put them back where you keep them. Oh, and by the way, there's a bunch of different jars of purees in there. I didn't know which ones you wanted, so I got a few different ones. But I see you've already eaten. Ben, thank you. But how am I going to pay you back? Why do you keep talking about money? You don't have to pay me back. They're all gifts. That's when the intercom buzzed. Here comes the washing machine. Today you'll have everything in perfect order. The movers lifted the machine to the floor, disconnected, and took the old one. I decided it was easier to replace it than to repair it at the store. It's a promotion. They take the old machine back to recycle field. So I saved money, Ben explained. Here's the manual for you to study for now. I'm going to go plug it in. By yourself. Jennifer was surprised. By myself, of course. It's a simple thing to do. Why waste money on installation? 3 hours after Ben's arrival, the new, almost silent washing machine was running. Archie sat in the assembled crib, which Jennifer had made up, and played with the new rattles. The girl and her son were drinking tea in the kitchen. You see, the man smiled. Life is getting better, and when you get a job, it will be beautiful. But I can't find a nanny for reasonable money. They are all some governesses come across, who promise to talk to him in 3 languages, to teach him. And I just need to feed him and take him for walks, at least on the balcony. Maybe you're looking there today? Try among pensioners to look for those who have just gone on vacation. They still have enough strength and can watch the child, and their demands are not cosmic. Where to find them? You will not rush to every elderly person on the street with such a question. Ask at work. And to do that, you have to go out there, and I can't go out there until Stepa's settled in. It's a vicious circle. Let me ask my friends in the chat room if anyone has such acquaintances. I can't promise results. We've already found a crib. Maybe we can find a nanny too. Thank you, Ben, but I don't feel comfortable asking you. You've done so much already, and we're nothing to you. You're my long-term investment. I'm interested in you keeping this apartment and paying rent. So consider it an investment in my secure old age. What old age? You're still a young man. That's something to think about when you're young. But I'm 32 now, so I'm not as young as you might think. I'm 23, she smiled. Oh, it's bedtime after all. I'm going to put him on the balcony. We'll go for a walk. Or maybe you and I will go for a walk in the park. He sleeps in the stroller there, and we'll go for a walk. Do you have time for that? Why not? It's the weekend. Get some fresh air? Jennifer started hesitantly. All right then. You get dressed, Archie, and I'll get the stroller out, Ben said before she could finish. When Ben entered the office, he saw Jacob walking toward him with a smile. He's going to ask about getting married again, he braced himself. Ben, are you considering men as nannies? Ben hesitated. He and Jennifer hadn't discussed that option. I don't know that you want to offer yourself, he smiled back. What about publishing? No, I wouldn't mind. But I've got a lot of unfinished business to take care of, so I'll hold off for now. But I have an older brother, a retired lieutenant colonel in the security services, retired a long time ago. He used to work part-time, but now he says he's fed up. I want something more peaceful. He stayed at home for 6 months and howled. Kids are grown up, no grandchildren. He doesn't like technology. He used to like to go camping with the school. But now, to get a job there, you have to collect a lot of different certificates. And he's not in good health. Jacob continued. I was at home, humming at your message. He's excited about it. He wants to try it. Well, I don't know if taking care of a small child is a relaxing thing to do, so maybe you'll give it a shot. I'll talk to the baby's mom. Good, because I don't know how she'll react, Ben said. Sure. He has a car, by the way. He can bring it in and drive it if necessary. I can do that. Okay, I'll tell him. Robert was not only older than his brother, but taller and broader in the shoulders. He limped a little and came to meet the mother of a possible ward. When asked about the limp, the man always answered evasively. His car pulled into the backyard of the house with difficulty. Ben, of course, was also present. Jennifer's reaction to the suggestion of taking a man as a babysitter was calm. I guess we're just used to the nanny always being a woman, but a man can do the same thing. And it's definitely easier for him to carry a stroller with a baby. Let's get acquainted. If Archie's not scared, why not? Archie not only wasn't scared, but even smiled when the older man took him in his arms and touched his eyes and nose with his fingers. Wow, he's so cooperative. Robert laughed softly. So are we friends now? Archie started babbling something back and blowing bubbles. It was the first time Jennifer had ever seen a child react to a stranger in such a way, and she smiled. What about money? She asked the future babysitter, explaining the child's daily routine to him. Well, Jennifer, for me it's more pleasure than money. But I'm just getting a job. I can't even pay a full-time nanny at the average rate. So you'll pay half. Ben and I will talk about it. What's Ben got to do with it? The girl was surprised. He's my son and the nanny. But it's none of my business, Robert interrupted. I'm sorry, for God's sake. I'm an old school man, and I simply can't take money from a woman, much less from such a charming girl. You'll talk to Ben about how much you're willing to pay me. He'll pay well. Otherwise, I'll take any amount. I understand a week, 2 weeks, a month. We'll see how it goes. This is new to me too. My wife raised my kids. I was always on duty or on assignment. And now the kids are grown, my wife's gone. Oh, what am I talking about? So if my services suit you, and I realize that I can cope, then we'll discuss the final scene. And if not, I'm sorry. But I'll find someone else to replace me so you won't be left without a nanny. Thank you, Jacob, Ben said. It's a deal. Can we do one more thing? Jacob asked. What's that? Just call me Bob. It's awkward. Are you much older? You can call me Bob, and you can call me Bob on a first-name basis. That's what my wife used to call me when she was angry, he smiled. Alas, they've gotten a little crazy. That means I was wrong about something. Why wouldn't you be? Ben wondered. I don't know, it's just the way it's been since we met. They called me Rybakov at school, and at the college too. Or just Okop. She didn't like it, so she came up with a consonant. All right, we'll agree on that, Ben said. You'll just be grandfather to the baby. Is that okay? Of course it's okay. I don't think he'll understand it now. That's good. Why don't you show me how to pack for a walk and we'll go for a walk? You've got a nice park nearby. Bob, with the stroller, proudly stepped forward, and behind him, Jennifer and Ben walked side by side, taking their time. What do you think of the candidate? Ben asked. First impressions are very favorable. If he can handle the baby as well as he does during the day, I don't think we'll find a better old lady. I liked him too. He and his brother look alike, by the way. Only he struggled to find the words, but finally came up with one. What's his? Monumental. Reliable then? Jennifer smiled. Except I still don't understand why you're helping me. I explained it to you last time. It's a long-term investment. But seriously, I realize I can help. Why don't you? Especially since the labor is minimal. I'm the one paying him. If I find out you're paying, I'll find another apartment and leave. All right. Don't worry. Everything will be just the way you want it. Finally, Jennifer went to work. First thing she did was go to Emily's with a box of chocolates. Oh, it's so good to see you, Jennifer. The woman was so happy. Come in, the candy is just in time. Now with you, we will drink tea, and you tell me about your life. How is your baby? Did you find a nanny? I found one, the girl nodded. But the nanny is a man, ex-military or something else. I do not know, frankly speaking. He was so caring. Memorized everything from the first time. He watches over the child. So sometimes I'm ashamed that I don't look like that. Anyway, we spent a month together looking at each other to see if we're right for each other. And? How's the kid reacting? He likes it a lot. He shuts up in Robert Alexeyevich's arms and sleeps peacefully. And where did you find such a treasure? Long story. Jennifer waved her hand. Kind people helped. That's right. There are more good people than there are good people. That's why you have to rely on them. How are things going at the company? No, I'm just retiring and handing things over. I briefly told my replacement about you. She says the new CFO is coming in. She'll take it up with him. Jennifer said the money for such help comes from the social fund. But in her opinion, that didn't convince Amber. So we're getting a new supervisor. I mean, how long can we go on without a CFO? I mean, we have his former deputy acting CFO. Apparently someone's not happy with him. They say they're looking for a new candidate. All right, apply while you still can. They'll get you the money. Thank you so much for everything and for them, and for the human attitude, Amber said. How long do you work until? Until the end of the month. And what are you planning to do after that? A vegetable garden in the country, Amber said. I don't like gardens. Mike laughed. You can quietly. And then you can not pull it out, yes. And the son, apparently it was passed on. He and his wife and daughter spend all summer. And I would rather be in the city, in the parks, to walk, cafes, go to the museum. Well, to be honest, I don't know yet. Why don't you come and visit us? You'll get to know each other. At least look at someone you actually saved with your help. Don't exaggerate. But if you invite us, we'll definitely drop by sometime. Can I write down your address? Or do you have a different one? No, it's still the same. You have your phone number. Call me if there's anything I can do for you. Thank you. I hope you don't need IT. Jennifer was sad all day. She had developed a very good relationship with the head of HR, and she was sorry to see her go. And these musings now and then, thoughts of how she was going to get on with her life, crept in. Well, nothing. The new boss will appear. I'll go to him myself, ask him. He's a human being. He should understand. We can try to look for another job. Maybe I should talk to Ben. I mean, come on, the slightest problem I have, I think he'll think I'm on his ass. I'll manage on my own. All these thoughts were interrupted by Archie's morning call. Jennifer, I'm sorry, for God's sake, but I'm sick. It's been a long time since I've been sick. I'm actually very hardened. Temperature's 39 today. Well, I can't go to the baby's house in case it's contagious, sure. Sure, Jennifer reassured him. I'll take the day off work. Feel better. I really need you. And Archie, even more, I'll make it quick. I'll make it quick. Okay. I'm sorry I let you down. No need to apologize, Archie. Well, you've been a great help to me for almost a year. Jennifer was about to object, but suddenly she ran out of steam. After losing part of her income in the form of financial aid, it would have been nice. But she was ashamed to even bring it up in front of herself. We'll talk about it later, she said into the phone. Get well. That weekend, when Ben arrived and Jennifer complained to him about her forced vacation without pay, he asked, Do you want me to pay this month's bonus? Why are you all about the money? Jennifer replied, You'd better go over there and ask him how he's feeling. Although I think if I call him, he'll take it as a request to come see the baby sooner. Okay, I'll talk to him. Don't worry. Yes, I also cut my salary at work. Suddenly the girl complained to him. How? Ben was indignant. They have no right. According to our labor laws, it's forbidden. Only if you reduce the working day. No, I had financial aid. Remember, I told you that the head of the personnel department wrote it out to me. Well, she retired, and the new one won't do it without the CFO's approval. And what? He said no. He hasn't started work yet. He's new. He'll start on the 3rd. What if you go talk to him yourself? I've already thought about it. I guess I'll have a look at him to see if he's even in my position or not. Hang in there, Jennifer. Maybe you should look for another job. I've thought about that too. But even looking at what I'm making in this position, I'm not being offered anything else. I'm not good at anything else. Jennifer, I want you to know that if you decide to quit, I'll help you out financially while you look for a new job. Ben, I already owe you everything. I don't even want to consider it. On Sunday, Emily came to visit. They sat in the kitchen and drank tea with a cake that the woman had baked for Jennifer and Archie. To be honest, I'm not much of a cook, but it's our family recipe. And everyone said it was delicious. Of course, maybe they're flattered, but it's better than store-bought, Emily said. Emily, you really are an amazing hostess. Thank you so much, Jennifer said. How's retirement life treating you? You know, I was worried it would be boring. But now I don't even have any free time. I was saving time for you at 12 today. Didn't you promise to introduce him to my boy's toy? Archie brought the woman all his toys and showed her how to play with them. Emily didn't get to play with him until Jennifer took him out to rest. Come, I'll do the dishes here, the woman told her. Oh, come on, don't. Yes, you do. You should rest too. When Archie was asleep, the women settled down in the kitchen. And Emily said seriously, Actually, I've come for one more thing. I want to warn you about your future boss. They say he's an excellent specialist, but he's not much of a man, but I don't know him personally. It's just a rumor. But you should be careful about opening up to him. Let HR ask him for you. Okay, Jennifer shrugged. What can he do? The only thing he can do is fire me. But then he'd have to pay severance. I don't know what he'll do, but don't trust him. Okay. I promise everything will be fine, Emily, don't worry. At that moment, Jennifer heard the sound of a key in the keyhole and the door opening. I wonder who it is. The girl thought, stepping out into the hallway. Ben and Jacob were the only ones with keys. Ben wouldn't have arrived without a call. Jacob stood on the doorstep. Jennifer. I'm sorry, for God's sake, he whispered. I know Archie's asleep at this hour, and I didn't call so I wouldn't wake him. It's okay, she nodded. Why are you here? Because of Amber. I feel guilty. I wish I could give you half a day off. Jacob walked into the kitchen and stopped in the doorway. I didn't realize you had company. Hello, I'm honored to introduce myself. Jacob. He stood in front of Emily. Emily, she smiled and gestured him to a chair. Please have a seat. Archie and I just met today. She looked at Jennifer with a smile. Emily and I worked at the same company, and we decided to meet today. I hope I'm not interrupting anything. Of course not, the woman smiled and set the third mug on the table. So you two aren't working together anymore? Jacob asked. I'm ashamed to admit it, but I'm retired. Emily lowered her eyes flirtatiously. Jennifer grinned at the spectacle being played out in front of her by people twice her age. What's there to be ashamed of? I've been retired for 15 years, and I'm not ashamed of it at all. I can say of such a fine lady that retirement is the beginning of life, Jacob said. I was just telling Jennifer that I don't have much free time yet. I'm reading books, learning computer programs, going on field trips. You know, all the things I've been putting off for so many years because of work. How did your family feel about that? Jacob asked. What family? Emily waved her hand. Her husband had passed away a long time ago, and the children were grown, independent. I don't like that. I don't like that. No, well, you speak my words. I slapped myself on the knee. God with it, I understand you perfectly well. And she listened to the conversation between her older friends and found much in common. Then Archie woke up and she retired to her son's room, leaving the two of them alone. Jennifer, we thought we'd go for a walk, Jacob asked her, peering into the room. Do you mind? Of course not. Don't you need me, Jennifer? The man winked at her. There's no third person. I thought the third was Archie. Jennifer also smiled. The children are beyond competition. It was at this time that the baby saw his babysitter and reached for him. The morning newsletter at work delighted Jennifer with the news. Dear colleagues, you are invited to join us today at 11:00 a.m. in the conference room. There will be an introduction to the new CFO of our company. He will tell you about the principles of his work and discuss further plans for the development of our company. Well, at last rejoiced the girl. At least some certainty. And then to live with the unknown tomorrow is worse than ever. There was excitement in the women's restroom. All the young female employees were tidying up before the meeting to seduce him. Are we going to do it in a bunch? The married ladies asked them. Or is he single? Married. Married, confirmed one of the girls. But they say he's no stranger to the female sex. You can be a mistress to begin with. And then, who knows, suddenly you'll be a wife. Jennifer only chuckled inwardly as she listened to these conversations. She'd been down this road, and it hadn't ended well. No, of course I have Archie, and that's fine. But the rest of it? No way, just strictly business negotiations, she thought to herself. Or quit. At 11:10, the conference room hummed quietly like a beehive as the CEO walked in, followed by William. Jennifer closed her eyes in surprise. "Sorry I'm late," the CEO said. "I'd like to introduce you to our new manager, Mike. He is now in charge of all financial matters. And thank goodness. Because frankly speaking, I'm tired of your wishes," he smiled. "Please, Mike, you have the floor." Hello, Mike stood next to the chair and slowly looked around the room. "First of all, let me say that my lateness today is an unforgivable oversight. I believe that all of us should work with the precision of a Swiss watch, as a single mechanism. That means no tardiness, no leaving early and no excuses. Only a doctor's note can influence the decision to take disciplinary action. And that, please note, frequent illness indicates that you do not take good care of your health. And with such we will not be on the way." The hall whispered the new chief started his speech too harshly. "You will ask all the questions later," he continued, interrupting some employees who raised their hands to clarify some points. "Secondly," and then William hesitated, meeting Jennifer's eyes. The girl sat staring at him without taking her eyes off him. Nothing betrayed the emotions that raged in her soul. And it was not hatred, contempt, or even pity. No, she suddenly realized to herself that it was love. A hard, dependent, unreachable love that forgave him for everything he had done to her life. And if she were asked now if she would repeat that path, she would undoubtedly answer in the affirmative. William was still saying something. Jennifer looked at him and realized how much she had missed him in the partial couple of years she hadn't seen him. It was one thing to not see a person and quite another to have them reappear in your life, and seemingly faded feelings suddenly rekindle. After the meeting, everyone went to their workplaces. Since the economics department reported directly to the new director, Mike's office was in their wing, right next to Jennifer's. Jennifer sat quietly at her desk and tried to concentrate, but all her thoughts were on him. That's when her phone lit up. A text from Mike came in. "Tomorrow at 9 in my office." Jennifer couldn't believe her eyes. Reread the message and replied, "Okay," then tried to tune in to work. All night she had hardly slept at all. Jennifer would get up, walk over to her son's bed and smile, thinking, we're definitely going to be okay now. She was sure Mike wouldn't say no to her. After all, this was his only son too. Jennifer pondered what to wear to the meeting to look both businesslike and attractive, but came up with nothing. As she was getting ready in the morning, she found a short black skirt in her closet that she had once worn on dates with him and decided to wear it. Wow. "Jennifer, are you going to a business meeting today?" The mirror on the wall asked. "Yes, a very important one," she nodded. "Well, good luck then. You look great, a real modern businesswoman." Jennifer smiled and drove to work. "Come in." Mike jumped up and locked the office door behind her, so we wouldn't be interrupted. "So you work here?" "Yes," she nodded. "How did you end up at our company? Weren't you a financial analyst?" "Well, it's not far from one or the other. Circumstances worked out. It's good to see you. You're still running in the park, looking great." "No, I'm not up to it right now, but hopefully I'll be able to resume training soon." "Great, have a seat." He pointed to the couch. "Tell me about your life. How's Archie?" So he's interested in his son, too, Jennifer thought. It didn't matter what his circumstances were. He's fine, he's growing up. We're planning to start kindergarten soon. And now with a nanny. Jennifer didn't go into details. "Wow, you can afford a nanny? Your salaries are pretty good." Jennifer sighed. "I've been meaning to talk about you." She hesitated when she felt his hand on her shoulder. Mike moved closer and whispered hotly in her ear. "I thought it had passed, but no. I want you so much. You're still beautiful, beautiful and free." Jennifer's head was spinning. She tried to pull away, but it only made her more attracted to him. "I want you too," she said tonelessly. "Do I have a favor to ask?" Mike pulled away. Jennifer opened her mouth, but he exclaimed, "No, don't say anything yet. I have an idea. Let's play boss and secretary." He lifted her off the couch and dragged her to the middle of the office. "I am the formidable boss. Are you afraid of me? Tell me what you want. Could you give me a raise?" Jennifer said timidly, not believing this game. What? I can't hear you. Louder, raise my salary. She repeated a little more clearly. But is that any way to talk to the boss? You address him as you beg him, and then you do whatever he says. A doubt stirred in Jennifer's soul. She froze. Well, what about you? Mike grinned. It's just a game. Let's give it a try. Come on, express your desire. Give me a raise. Boss, Jennifer said loudly. But don't order it. You have to beg for it. See what the boss said? Take your skirt down. You're a subordinate, so take it off. Not like that. More erotic. How do you do it? You need me to do your bidding. So follow my instructions. Jennifer began to slowly remove her skirt, entering the game. Dear boss, please give me a raise. Why is that? Me and my son Archie will soon have nothing to eat. But any favor requires a return favor. You understand, don't you? And I'm prepared to do you one. Just please give me a raise. Jennifer was so into the role that a tear rolled down her cheek. She realized that she really wanted to cry and tell Mike everything she had been through since he left. After these thoughts, tears came to her eyes from weakness or self-pity. Mike couldn't take it anymore and ran up to the half-naked girl. He was so aroused that he easily entered her and poured all the accumulated passion, standing on the carpet. Then he picked her up in his arms and carried her to the couch. They enjoyed each other's intimacy for a few more minutes. Soon the man stood up. Time for work, he smiled at Jennifer. She nodded and began to clean herself up. All week her soul had been singing from her newfound love. Jacob noticed her mood. Are you in love by any chance, Jennifer? Why are you suddenly asking that? It's just that I've never seen you in such a beautiful mood before. It's like you're glowing from the inside out. No, Jacob, I didn't tell him my secrets. It's just that life is getting better, little by little. Whatever it is, I'm infinitely happy for you. I hope there will be room in this life for me as your old acquaintance. Undoubtedly. But just don't emphasize the word old, Jennifer smiled. You have a fine age. If I had been told that before I met you, I would probably have started to refute the fact. However, a lot has changed since then. He winked enigmatically at his ward's mother. The next week, the meeting in the office was repeated, and so did the game. Although it didn't feel so new, Jennifer was more in character now, and her closeness to Mike was back on her mind. 2 weeks later, her boss left on a business trip, and Jennifer waited impatiently for his return until payday. Then she received money even less than usual. The girl came to the accounting department with a question. Mike was the one who told everyone to cut off their overtime pay, she was told. Everyone, all of them, the girls nodded. Jennifer was upset, but decided to wait until Mike arrived to clear the air. When the two of them were alone in the office again, she didn't get flirtatious and joined in the game. I got a very small paycheck here. The girls in accounting said it was your order. Yes, I told them to remove overtime pay for all employees. You work here, so that means it affects you too. But why is it your fault that you don't get everything done on time? Why should the company's money go to that? Mike, but I told you. I don't have enough money to live alone with Sandy. Right now the paycheck is below the market average. Didn't you promise me you'd give me a raise? I promised when here we are, the two of us together here when we were playing and loving each other. It's just a game. Well, you just said yourself that we were playing. Who said it was serious? But even so, haven't you realized that your son Archie and I need money? Everyone needs money. As the CFO, I know that for a fact. For that matter, you asked for it. But I didn't promise anything. I also said, do what the boss says, quid pro quo. That's the rules of the game, which we both enjoyed, by the way. That's me, isn't it? I could see you wanted me too. I made you feel good. And we live by very different rules. So you just used me, and in doing so, you cheated on me. But you used my body too. Or did you do it for money? Here's the raise I supposedly promised you. Jennifer placed the resignation letter in front of him. Sign it, she demanded. You're talking to your boss in an inappropriate tone. You're not my boss anymore, so sign the letter and I'll quit, Jennifer insisted. Mike got up from his desk, walked over and closed the door again. If you keep harassing me, I'll file a rape report with the police. Well, why be so rude? I mean, we know each other well. We even have a son. You should have thought of your son when you signed the payroll. I'm doing this for the company, not for my own personal interests. That's why I'm leaving, so you don't confuse the two, Jennifer said. What about me? Aren't you going to find yourself another fool? Don't you realize I'm having a good time with you? And I think you are too, Mike objected. It was good, but it's gone. You can't fool me indefinitely, Jennifer said. Ugh, what a word, deceive. I didn't fool anyone. You're the one who made it up. Both my promises and my deceptions, Mike objected. Are you going to sign a letter of resignation? Well, if you want to quit, sure. But why don't you take a look at this first? He pointed to his screen. And what's this I'm going to see? Are you going to promote me after all? Flashed through her mind. Why don't you take a look? Jennifer walked over to the chair and looked at the monitor. At that moment, Mike started up the video files. They showed Jennifer herself evolving in the center of the office, on the carpet, as if to music, almost like a professional dancer. She watched in horror as she removed all her clothes and underwear from below her waist, then stretched her arms toward Mike, who approached her, as if reluctantly, with his face distorted beyond recognition. Her face can be seen clearly, alas, not just her face. It's impossible to tell from the man who it is. You sneaky bastard, so you were also filming us. From where? Jennifer exclaimed. What are you talking about? It's just CCTV cameras. They're in every office. You have to take and sign an order from the CEO and then take the footage. You can do whatever you want with them. Jennifer lowered her eyes. There are plenty of programs for processing video files. Say, that worked out well, didn't it? Didn't you ever want to be an actress? All girls usually want to, and a lot of guys too. You definitely have talent, Mike said. And what do you think your new employer will say when he sees this? I won't tell you where you'll be working. Trust me. It's not hard to find out at all. You could put it on the internet and you'd be a porn celebrity. That's not a bad prospect either. Then every man in town will recognize you and make lewd propositions. So are you going to sign the application, or are you going to stay after all? When it's just me watching this movie. It's one of my favorites, by the way. I've memorized all your little gestures from it, Mike continued. You want me and Archie to starve to death on the street? How can you think that about me? I'm just calculating all the options so you can't disappear from my sight. And what are we going to live on? Well, you've lived somehow before, so you'll continue to do so. So how about a statement? Jennifer grabbed a paper off her desk with anger, tore it up and threw it in Mike's face. Then she walked out of the office and slammed the door loudly, then left the office for a nearby cafe and, locking herself in the bathroom, cried for a long time from her own powerlessness and anger at herself for being so deceived. After a while, Bob walked into the cafe. Hi, sorry to be so abrupt, but do you know what happened to our Jennifer? Hello, Bob. No, what happened? She was so cheerful, and then she's abruptly withdrawn, walking around moody. And there's only food in the house for Archie. I haven't seen her in a long time. Is she sick? After that walk with Archie, Bob and Emily exchanged phone numbers. The man tried not to be annoying, but sometimes called for the most unexpected reasons. For example, when he learned delicious and quick recipes for cooking potatoes, he thought that Emily didn't like to cook either. And here's 15 minutes in the microwave and such a delicious meal, finger-licking good. Or he shared news from the publishing industry, which his younger brother regularly supplied him with. Alex told me that Shaposhnikov has a new book out. It is already planned to screen. Not interested in his work. Emily, in turn, also shared with him discoveries made on excursions or simply in her now quiet new life. And when the weather was nice, they would also meet in the park, walking and smiling at each other when they were called grandparents, and then laughing contagiously while sitting on a bench. Well, of course, if Archie calls me grandpa, then I'm grandpa to everyone. Not being grandpa would be bad, Bob said one day. How's that? Emily didn't understand. It's very simple, isn't it? I'd be a grandfather if he called me grandpa. But Archie calls grandfather that word, according to the rules of the Russian language, would be in the genitive case. Who? Grandfather. Forgive my nerdiness. Anyway, if I'm a grandfather, or even a grandfather, then since you're walking with me, you're a grandmother. I called the girls I know at my old job and found out they'd gotten a pay cut. Maybe that's why Jennifer is so upset. She just doesn't have enough money. I've told her how many times she can stop paying me, but she adamantly refuses to listen to me. Jennifer tried to refuse Emily when she called to say she was going to visit. The girl was ashamed to invite to her practically beggar's house. But the woman had insisted, and Bob had also said more than once that it would be good to meet and sit together. With the last money she had saved, Jennifer tearfully bought tea and rusks and prepared for the guests.
Bob and Emily came in together.
"Can you believe it, Jennifer? We met at the front door." "Here to help carry the bags," Bob said. They started taking chicken and canned goods, jam and cakes out of the bags. "I'm sorry," Jennifer said to the guest. "I didn't have time to cook it all, so I ran to the store and bought a few little things." "Well, Emily, it looks to me like you bought the whole store in small change. What are we going to do with all this? Or are you going to live with me now?" Jennifer smiled and looked at Jacob. "I wonder why that idea never occurred to me before." "Me neither," he said, surprised. "Jennifer, I was just talking to my girls over tea," the former colleague said. "They claim that the new boss has removed overtime." "Yes," the girl nodded sadly. "He says it's our own fault for not getting everything done during working hours. So the company doesn't have to pay us extra." "I'm sorry, but I know your salary," Emily said. "How are you going to live now? Maybe it's time to change jobs." Jennifer couldn't explain to albeit good, strangers how her father had naively caught her on the hook, and that now she couldn't change jobs. "I tried," she lied, "but I couldn't find anything suitable." "So I thought you might need help," Emily continued. "So I talked to some people I know. There are at least 2 places that will hire you at 1.5 times your salary. Maybe you could try interviewing there." Jennifer realized that it was impossible to refuse, so she nodded. "Yes, of course, I'll definitely go. Thank you for your concern." Mike realized the power he now had over his subordinate and began to invite her into the office and tried to harass her there. "If you are not with me, the video will be seen by everyone," he reminded the girl every time. So far, Jennifer had managed to come up with good reasons for refusal, whether it was an illness or an important meeting. But she was well aware that soon all these excuses would cease to work. And even if he started raping her, Jennifer would have nothing to defend herself with. That upset her even more. The girl felt like she was being sucked into a swamp she couldn't get out of. But she was already so tired of this tension that she was ready to wave her hand and give up. Then Ben showed up after hours. He usually came once or twice a month, spending some time with Jennifer, Archie, and Jacob. If he was on site, sometimes the 4 of them would all go for a walk and Ben would leave. This time he arrived late at night after work when Jacob was gone. Archie was asleep, and Jennifer was lying on the couch watching some channel on the TV, thinking about something of her own. Ben entered the apartment so quietly that Jennifer found him when he was already standing in the room. "Oh, hi," she smiled. "Did something happen?" "Yes," the man nodded. "We need to talk. Let's go to the kitchen." When they sat down at the table, he continued. "Jacob came to see me. He gave me a long explanation about Emily, about the empty refrigerator, about your paycheck being cut. All I got out of it was that for some reason you wouldn't leave this job, even though you had other good offers. I'm not retracting what I said about helping you, but I still want to ask why. Is it your desire to sit on the neck of others, or is there some other reason?" And abruptly patience burst, and Jennifer nodded. "There are. But when am I going to tell you about them? I can't. It would be like I'm putting my problems on you again. And besides, I'm really embarrassed." "Ashamed of what?" "My behavior, my naivete, the fact that I'm using you and Jacob. Even though I know exactly how bad it is and that it's wrong. So you feel guilty. And that's why you refuse to tell me everything."
Jennifer nodded again.
"Then imagine that tomorrow Jacob and I were gone. You'd be alone with your secret. What would you do?" "I don't know." "I'd throw myself in front of a train," she said sadly. "So you're ready to give up your life, but you're not ready to share it with me." Jennifer sighed and said softly, "I'm being blackmailed." Ben was questioningly silent. If he had asked clarifying questions or inquired, the girl would probably have withdrawn. But he remained silent and looked expectantly at Jennifer. "My new boss." Jennifer closed her eyes and said in a muffled voice, "He's Archie's father." Ben had 1,000 questions. How can you blackmail the mother of your child when you don't live with them and haven't even acknowledged your son? But he restrained himself and continued to remain silent. Jennifer sighed and began to tell. "When he came, he summoned me, and we were together again. He was so attentive. Then he cut everyone's pay by canceling overtime. And when I wanted to quit, he showed me a video. Tears came out of the girl's eyes. He recorded everything. He had video surveillance. He hid himself, but I'm on it in great detail. He said he'd send it to his employer or put it on the website so everyone would know what I was like. How's Archie going to grow up with a mom like that? And he knows where we live. And I'm afraid that if I quit, he'll be watching me. He's cut my pay here, and he's always calling me to his office. He makes himself patient, he tries, but I still find reasons to refuse. This can't go on much longer. I'll either have to accept it, or... It's none of my business, but I want to understand why you want to be with him again, after he left you and your son Ben interrupted. I saw him for the first time in almost 2 years, and I realized I still loved him. He was all attentive, just like the first time. I thought he'd come back to us. There's nothing like that on any show. You should really get out of there and run for your life. I'm ready to, but I can't. Do you still love him? Jennifer looked up at Ben with tears in her eyes.
I hate him. I'd probably kill him. He disgusts me. I shake every time I hear his voice, and even when he calls me into the office.
So I take it you're willing to walk away if he stops threatening to release the video? Of course, I lie awake nights thinking about how to do it, but I can't think of anything. It's either kill him or kill myself. Either way, Archie will be an orphan.
The girl cried again. I told you that you could come to me for help. Why didn't you do it right away?
I was fine at first. And when the tape came out, I'm ashamed, Ben. I mean, you're a stranger in this.
Did it ever occur to you that blackmail is a felony? I mean, you can punish him yourself, threaten him with the police, after all.
Jennifer tried to explain herself. She said that Mike had threatened to spread the videotape and then she'd get good lawyers. She's still going to lose, the scoundrel. Okay, let's see who else loses. Sandy's advice was to go to the clinic on Monday and take a sick day. But that meant less income. But it'll get your nerves back in order. Yes, it's difficult, but you can't say no at this time. Jennifer had a question. Out of what funds was Sandy paying God's mom? Jennifer took out a loan. How would she pay it back? Jennifer shrugged her shoulders. She doesn't. She doesn't have the means to pay it back. If she loses her job, she won't lose anything. But if she changes jobs, how? That's something to think about. When Jennifer went on sick leave, she realized that Ben was right about one thing. She was much calmer. She was out of the circle of constant unpleasant thoughts. The girl was listed in the company, but she was protected from Mike's attacks and threats, and she still didn't know what she would do next. Right now she had a break, and it was helping Jennifer recover a little. On Saturday, Ben, Jacob, and Emily showed up on the doorstep of Jennifer's apartment. Jennifer, get Archie ready to go for a walk, Jacob ordered. Emily will go to the park with him, and they will stay behind. They have much to discuss. Without raising her eyes, the girl dressed her son and handed him over to the care of her former co-worker. As the door closed behind them and everyone else made their way to the kitchen, Ben said, "I'm sorry, but I had to tell Jacob something. We can't do this without his help." "Don't worry, girl, I brought more scoundrels to light," the older man said. "I've been investigating for over 20 years for a reason." Jennifer looked at Jacob. "You?" "Yeah, didn't you know? I thought you were ex-military."
There are no exes like me, he smiled. Now let's discuss our actions.
The same day Jennifer returned from her sick leave, she got a call from Mike. "Please come into my office in an hour."
Okay, Mike. I'll come over, the girl said, so that those around her could hear her.
She sorted out the files left over from her absence. Then she wrote an email, replied in Messenger, and then took the first folder she could find and walked with a businesslike stride to her boss's office. Knocked on the office, heard a loud come in and opened the door. Come in, Mike," as usual, got up from his seat and went to lock the door behind the girl. She turned around and watched intently while he did so. "I brought you some," she began. The man pointed to the nightstand. "You can pick it up later." "Where have you been for so long? I missed you so much." He began to come closer and closer. Jennifer could barely contain the unpleasant shiver. Finally, his hands touched her clothes. He left the jacket in place, ran his hands lower down her stomach to her skirt. "You dressed like that for me today. Do you want what I want?" The girl remained silent, and Mike took it as agreement. When he was about to unzip her skirt, Jennifer suddenly said in a harsh voice, "Don't do that. I don't want to." "Well, what do you want, you silly girl?" "After all, I can see it. I want you." "No, you're wrong. I'm asking you to let me go and sign my resignation letter." Mike recoiled sharply from her. "What? Or is my memory gone? I still have the video on my desktop. 2 clicks of the mouse and everyone around here will know what you're like." "I'm not." "Yeah. But only I know that. And I'm not going to tell anyone. I can keep a secret. Especially when there's an obedient girl around. Come on, don't be stubborn. We'll be good together." And he reached for her again. "Sign the application. And then you'll be undressing already." "Are you serious? You think that's going to stop me?" "I'm serious, Mike. There's my statement on the nightstand. Sign it, and then do what you want." "What if I want you?" "I said you want me." Then it was a deal. Mike took the paper, put his sprawling signature on it, and put it back. "But you'll only go to the nightstand through me and what I want," he said. "And when you and I are done, and you leave your workplace, I will, as I said before, send the video to all interested parties. That will guarantee that when I come to visit you and your son, you won't kick me out. Why is that? Because I'll be the only person who knows the truth about you. Everyone else will turn away, and then you'll belong to me. Isn't it enough that I'm with you now? Why send out more videos?" Jennifer asked. "Just once?" "No, of course not. I want you to be with me as long as I want you to be with me, and only with me, so no one else will ever come near you. But you have a way out in a statement, just like last time. And no one but you and me will know about the existence of this erotic masterpiece." Saying this, Mike walked over to the girl and started undressing her. Jennifer didn't move and thought, but suddenly a siren sounded and the internal radio came to life. "Attention. Fire alarm. Evacuation. Everyone, evacuate the building immediately. Please do not use elevators, take the stairs. Attention. Fire alarm." What the hell? Mike swore, looking at the radio. "I thought it wasn't working." "Thank God it does," Jennifer smiled inwardly. "That's what I thought." There was a knock on the office door. "Mike, out. There's a fire." Jennifer began to quickly pull up her skirt, which Mike had managed to unbutton. He grabbed his briefcase and ran to the door, opened it, and sprinted out of the office. Jennifer calmly went to the nightstand, picked up the application, and also, without hurry, went away. The play is over, she thought as she walked down the stairs with everyone else. While the firemen were inspecting the building and allowing everyone to return to their workplaces, Jennifer stealthily got into Ben's car, which was parked around the corner, and drove to the police station. There she wrote a statement, attached evidence, and returned to the office. 2 hours afterward, a police car pulled up to the building. 3 officers got out, showed their documents, and went up to the floor where the CFO's office was located. There they showed them, "But he's not here right now." "It doesn't matter to us," replied one of the policemen. "What's the matter?" The CEO approached as the uniformed men were taking the system unit out of Mike's office. "Don't interfere with the investigation." One of them pushed him away with his hand. "But there are trade secret documents in there." "I sympathize. Are you interfering with the work of the police right now?" The director backed off. "No, I just wanted to understand what happened. The mystery of the investigation. Perhaps your employee will tell you." "He's not back yet." "All the worse for him." After lunch, Jennifer took her boss's signed application to HR. Mike apologized profusely for losing it in the paperwork. "But here it is, signed 2 weeks ago. So have my paperwork ready starting tomorrow." "I don't work here." "We won't have time for that," the HR girl said. "But it's not my problem. Make a note in the employment record. I can't give it to you. Send an order to the accounting department so that they made the calculation. I'll come back for the rest later. I've got some paperwork to get to my new job." Before leaving, Jennifer once again looked in the personnel department, took her documents, and with a victorious smile left the office. "My girl, you're just a born actress," were the words that greeted Jennifer Jacob when she got home from work. "I've seen the video. There's no doubt about blackmail, harassment, and a couple of other questionable actions. And if they can find something on the computer for the Economic Crimes Unit to pick on, this scumbag won't have a care in the world to get his ass out of the shit she's in. Thank you. Such a great hidden camera on your jacket lapel and good quality recording. The girl smiled at him. Of course, it's a little illegal. Jacob sighed. But my former subordinates won't cling to such trivialities either. When Ben told Jacob about Jennifer's situation, he was indignant. Why didn't you tell me before? Who would do something like that right away? So much time had been wasted because of that. He got miniature recording devices hidden in a woman's brooch through former colleagues. He contacted the fire inspector on behalf of the investigation team and detailed a scenario for the main character. Jennifer, your #1 job is to report to me as soon as you go into the office. And task #2 is to stall for time without giving him a chance to jump you. Okay, I don't know how I'm going to do that. I want to tear him into 1,000 little pieces. I'm sure for your future, and more importantly Archie's future, you'll be able to contain yourself. Will you? Jennifer smiled. I'll try. The rest was a matter of technique, getting the fire alarms to go off, kicking everyone out of the building, arranging time with the investigator to take a statement and camera footage, sending a team to confiscate the computer. It took a little longer than planned. But by the end of the day, it was clear that Ben and Jacob had managed to get the girl out of the trap that love, trust, and perhaps her own stupidity had put her in. Jennifer got a job at one of the companies she was invited to on Emily's recommendation, and gradually began to come to her senses and pay off her loan debt. This is called Sophia Loren Amber led Jacob over to a dark maroon rose in her makeshift rose garden. I can see why the man smiled. So much dignity and beauty. Yes, the woman agreed. And the burrow is the same, requires more care than others. Let's go to the table. Well, did you take a walk in the garden? Emily looked at Jacob, smiling. Oh, and by the way, I was introduced to Sophia Loren. What did you say? I said she was beautiful, but my heart went out to another woman. I said she was beautiful, but my heart went out to another woman. I wonder who that is. You, my Amber, he concluded, hugging the woman. I see all the men at the grill are crazy about her. Emily laughed. At that moment, Archie ran up to Amber. Grandma Emily, let's go. Let's go where, dear? The child waved his hand uncertainly. The older woman took him by the hand, and the baby led her to the honeysuckle table, where Jennifer was gathering treats for the table. Golden boy. Jennifer, why did you keep him a secret for so long? I was afraid you wouldn't like the fact that I had a baby. After all, you only rented the apartment to me. No kids, no pets. Remember? I remember. And I'm not going back on my word. But I'm not so old that I don't realize that life moves on and changes will happen. Your Archie is like a grandson to me. I don't know if Ben will ever give me one of his. Amber looked at her son, who was grilling kebabs by the grill and talking to Alec. I asked to come, Jacob's brother explained. I wanted to see who you were buying the baby clothes for, but also his brave mother, of course, who wasn't afraid to take Jacob as her son's nanny. Don't you have a reason to change your plans now? Ben obediently began turning the kebabs. If I were a dozen years younger, he continued, I would definitely follow your charming mother. And if I were younger, then for the mom of this charming baby. I don't see what you have to lose. Ben lifted his head, looked at Jennifer, and waved back at her. The girl sent him an air kiss. He traced the gestures with his eyes and sighed. Well, that just leaves your mom.